Live from Washington, D.C., Transport Topics presents Automate, learning sessions for executives of technology and automation. Featuring Transport Topics Managing Editor, features Seth Clevenger. Transport Topics Equipment Editor, Michael Fries. Transport Topics Executive Editor, Joe Howard. With special guests, Don Burnett, founder and CEO of Kodiak Robotics. Vivian Sun, Chief Commercial Officer at Wabi. Jan Becker, President, CEO, and co-founder of Apex AI. And finally, Dr. Peter von Schmidt, CEO of Torque. And leading you through your day from start to finish, your host, Associate News Editor, and voice of Transport Topics Radio, Dan Ronan.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dan Ronan, the senior reporter at Transport Topics and host of Transport Topics Radio. Welcome to Automate. This is our final virtual event of 2022 in our quarterly series for trucking technology and maintenance leaders. We'll be focusing today on the business case for self-driving trucks, how autonomous developers are working with the industry, and what the future of freight transportation, well, what it might look like. While the questions surrounding self-driving technology and unmanned operations always seem to begin with how, now we're asking the question of when. As the number of fleets participating in the online highway test and pilots with AV developers grows, the developers are partnering with the OEMs to integrate their technology. How close are we now to full commercial deployment, and what will be the role that drivers will be playing for the years to come? Our conversations begin with the most recent issue of iTech. It will continue today with input from key figures who have endeavored to make and deploy innovative solutions to the industry's operational issues. So here's what's in store. Our morning keynote speaker is Don Burnett. He discusses the goal of autonomous trucking and hub-to-hub operations, highlighting the reliance on the human driver for the first and final mile when autonomous trucking shows for 24/7 operations on certain routes. In a special video edition of the Road Signs podcast, Vivian Sun joined Seth Clevenger to speak about Wabi's virtual simulator built to test and train autonomous driving systems before hitting the road. Then Jan Becker of Apex.ai provides insight into the challenges and benefits of deploying advanced driver assistance systems or autonomous driving technology. At the lunch hour, Seth Clevenger, as iTech's editor, will share his perspective on the evolution of freight transportation technology, the latest innovations that were on display at the ATA's MC&E in San Diego, and how soon we could see big change for the industry. Our afternoon keynote guest is Dr. Peter von Schmidt. He discusses the opportunities that autonomy offers customers on the highway, including operational and maintenance efficiencies, as well as driver and technician support. There's always our cup of Joe. Our TT Executive Editor, Joe Howard, will be joined by Seth Clevenger and Michael Fries to chat and have a cup of Joe about how they cover progress and their expectations for the commercial deployment and industry adaptation. And finally, I'll offer some final thoughts at the end of the day. We'll have a special segment called The Big Ideas. It was fun. I'll be a rapid-fire interview with both Michael Fries and Seth Clevenger, who will be answering questions on the big ideas that they're covering, from automation to EV infrastructure, and what stories they think they'll be seeing next down the pike. But first, let's kick off today's top stories. Here's our Transport Topics Daily Briefing.
Now let's dive into the day's top stories. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds announced $6 million to reimburse eligible employers to help remove obstacles for new truck drivers who want an entry-level commercial driver license. The new effort is called the Iowa Entry-Level Driver Training Program. It is available for Iowa-based employers, employer consortia, and nonprofits that hire Iowa CDL drivers and provide entry-level driver training either in-house or with third-party certified training providers. The U.S. Senate has confirmed Shailen Bhatt as the 21st Administrator of the Federal Highway Administration. Bhatt, the first Administrator of Indian descent, will be responsible for managing an agency currently dispersing funds approved in the $1 trillion Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. At a hearing before a Senate committee this year, Bhatt pointed to the need for dedicating additional safety resources for the nation's mobility corridors. The advent of electric-powered commercial trucks has raised new design consideration for tires. Tire makers are examining potential reconfigurations for tires used on electric trucks to optimize performance, minimize wear, and reduce the amount of time fleets spend reworking tried-and-true wear cycle metrics and replacement practices. Weight and torque are the two main factors that affect electric trucks' tire performance and wear. Also, EV batteries add a significant amount of weight to the vehicle, up to 5,000 pounds. Tire manufacturers are taking note of these operating differences and the impact on their products. That's it for today. Remember, for all the latest trucking and transportation news, go to the experts at ttnews.com.
Next up, stay tuned for the interview with today's morning keynote guest, Don Burnett, founder and CEO of Kodiak Robotics.
Next on Automate, I'm very excited to bring in Don Burnett, CEO of self-driving truck developer Kodiak Robotics. Thanks for joining us, Don.
It's great to be here.
So, Don, you've been right at the center of autonomous vehicle development for the past decade plus. You worked on the Google self-driving car project. You were a co-founder of self-driving truck startup Otto, which of course was acquired by Uber. And now you're the founder and CEO of Kodiak Robotics. So you've really seen this new emerging piece of the industry evolve from some of the earlier days. And to begin our conversation, I'd like to take us back to 2016. So that's when Otto hauled a load of beer for Anheuser-Busch in Colorado. And it was a demonstration, but I think it was a landmark moment for self-driving trucks because it really opened some eyes to the possibilities for automated driving in the trucking industry. And now here we are 6 years later. From your perspective, Don, just how much progress has been made toward autonomous trucking, and how far do developers like Kodiak still have to go to reach commercial deployment at scale, which of course is the goal?
Well, it's crazy to think how long it's actually been, the last 14 years on this path to development that we've been on. And when I look back and think about 2016, it was a really exciting time. Self-driving trucking was just getting started. And I really look back fondly of what we were able to achieve at Otto. And while you mentioned that was just a demo, and it really was. It wasn't something that we could generalize to other routes and other conditions. It was highly optimized for that specific scenario. It was still a monumental achievement for the time, particularly given the sensors and the equipment and compute and everything that we had at that moment. And the industry has come a long way since then. While that was just a one-off demonstration, we are now at Kodiak over the last 4.5 years. We've been running commercial freight on a day in and day out basis for companies like Werner Enterprises, Siva Logistics, US Express, and others. This is becoming a much more real technology now than it was back in 2016. I mean, that was 6 years ago, and we've made a tremendous amount of advancements on the tech that we use, the sensors we have access to, the compute power, the algorithms, the machine learning and artificial intelligence that's gone into it has really brought this technology from demonstration into daily commercial use. And really where we are now as an industry, or at least where we are at Kodiak, is that we're working on what we call our safety case framework. We're looking to prove that safety case, which is a statistical conclusion that we draw that says we are actually safe enough. We're as safe as a human driver. We can deploy our trucks driverless on the public roads in a real commercial setting. That involves obviously on-road driving, but also a lot of simulation work. So think about millions and millions of miles of driving in simulation, and also closed track testing. It's things like functional safety analysis. It's showing the redundancy exists throughout the system, and that we can always safely handle any circumstance that comes our way. And so, we've come a long way since the days of Otto. Really proud of the work that we did back there, and even more proud of what we've accomplished so far at Kodiak.
To your point, we've certainly moved well past the initial demonstration phase, and we're really, onto solving all the technical details to fully, get this technology ready for commercialization. And you mentioned some of the partnerships we've seen develop, and we've seen a lot of that across this emerging field with AV truck developers forming partnerships with motor carriers, truck manufacturers, other players in the freight transportation industry to really accelerate that testing and development, and to your point, even haul freight. And Kodiak, for one, has formed many such partnerships. You're working with, as you mentioned, U.S. Express, Warner Enterprises, others like IKEA, Tenrose Express. So very large, well-known trucking companies, logistics companies, and large national brands that are interested in being a part of shaping this technology and working on implementing it potentially in the future. So Don, just tell us a little bit more about those pilot programs. How are they paving the way for commercial deployment in the future?
Absolutely. We've now been working with commercial partners for over 3.5 years. We've delivered over 2,500 commercial loads using our autonomous technology, and we're operating 24/7 across the southern United States with various partners, as you mentioned. And the important piece of the puzzle here is to understand that technology doesn't get developed in a vacuum. It's really important for us to truly deeply understand the needs and pain points of these carriers who are our eventual customers so that we can build the right technology that integrates into their existing ecosystem. People like to often talk about disruption of markets. This really isn't so much disruption as it is technology slotting in to make the system more efficient, safer, and ultimately more resilient. So part of the benefit of working with these commercial partners is that it gives us a glimpse into their world. They work with us so that we can build the right product for them. But it also puts us to the test in terms of we're moving freight on a schedule for them day in and day out. We don't get to avoid rush hour traffic. We don't get to choose our own windows for pickup and delivery. We have to handle rain. We have to handle all kinds of inclement weather, construction zones. Basically, we have to handle everything that the highway environment throws at us. And that's something that's really, really valuable that you just don't get if you're not out there each day in, day out working basically in the commercial market.
Sure. And I also want to take a little bit of time to talk about deployment models and business cases for autonomous trucks. I recently put together call it a lineup of self-driving truck startups or technology developers that are actively working on this technology, and it's more than a dozen companies, but with different types of operations, different strategies, different ways of applying automation to the trucking industry. I'd say the majority are somewhat similar to Kodiak in that the goal is automating, certain highway routes, right? Longer distances on highways, often in hub-to-hub operations. So, Don, I want to just kind of turn it over to you. What's your perspective on, the best use case for autonomous trucks, and what are you pursuing at Kodiak? What types of routes and freight lanes, do you see as best suited to autonomy?
Well, definitely the long distance over the road routes are the ones that are most suited to autonomy and the most applicable to our 24/7 operation. And we are heavily focused on the hub model, the transfer hub model, where the autonomous truck focuses primarily on the highway portion of the driving. And we rely still on human drivers to handle what we call the first and last mile. So think about distribution center to transfer location that's highway adjacent. You change the trailer, swap the load onto an autonomous tractor. That tractor then drives maybe hundreds or even thousands of miles down the road, and you've reversed the process on the other side. This keeps humans intimately involved in the system. We still rely on human drivers, and this is something that I think you're gonna see for some time to come. And one example of this we demonstrated with Warner Enterprises a couple of months ago, where we delivered for them 8 continuous round trips, I think it was, between Dallas and Lake City, Florida. So we kept our trucks running 24/7 for 152 hours straight. We had 100% on-time delivery rating, and we were not 94% of all of that driving was handled in autonomous mode,
Yeah.
which was our first ever time running that route. So it's not like
Hmm.
we spent months and months and months
Yeah.
perfecting that route. That was literally the first time that our trucks had ever seen that route. And it was over 1 hours of service. We had the Werner drivers with their trucks bring the loads to our facilities that were highway adjacent. We just ran 24/7 back and forth without ever turning off the system. This is a glimpse of the future. This is the kind of reliability. This is the kind of efficiency you're going to see in the future with self-driving that you just can't get with drivers today.
Yeah, and just to be perfectly clear on sort of the state of the technology, and the goal, today with the on-road testing and pilot programs, there's a safety driver behind the wheel. Usually like a data scientist or an AV specialist on board as well. But the goal is to reach full automation, unmanned vehicles for those hub-to-hub routes. That then at a transfer hub will swap trailers with a manned vehicle, a traditionally human-driven truck for shorter transportation on the front and back end of the overall journey.
That's right. We have a safety driver behind the wheel for all of our operations. Sorry, I should have mentioned that and made that explicitly clear. We no longer have a human in the right seat
Okay.
operating the software. Our system is fully automated from that respect. The driver just focuses on the road, making sure that the truck is doing exactly the behaviors that they would expect it to do, and we can remotely monitor the trucks from a central location. So we no longer have that
Okay.
secondary operator in the vehicle.
Okay. And, much of this on-road testing and the pilot programs we've been referencing, a lot of that has been centered in the Sun Belt. We saw some initial activity, in Arizona, and still it continues there. But, lately it's really been spreading a lot in Texas. It's been kind of emerging as sort of the prime, incubator for this technology, or kind of the first, call it the cradle of autonomous trucking, if you will. Kodiak, for example, was opened a testing and operations facility in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So, Don, why has this region, really emerged as this first use case, and this sort of the prime geography for autonomous trucking, and how do you see it expanding geographically in the future?
Kodiak was actually the first AV company to go to Texas way back in 2018, and that's something that we're really proud of. Texas is a great location for a number of reasons. One, it's an incredibly freight-rich state. It has seaports, it has land ports, a lot of the freight that moves across the southern corridor. Think about coming in from the East Coast, Atlanta going to LA, or vice versa, coming in from the Pacific going to the East Coast. A lot of that freight runs through Texas, whether that's I-10 or I-20. And so when you look at where does it make sense to set up your testing and operations facility and start to commercially operate, Texas makes a lot of sense. Of course, Texas also has great infrastructure. It has great weather. It has very, very favorable regulatory environment. We met with the regulators at the state level, the local city level, and the DOT and a lot of the other organizations within Texas, and they were very welcoming. They recognize the significance of what self-driving is going to bring to the freight industry from a resiliency perspective, from an efficiency perspective, from an economic perspective. They really wanted to be on the forefront. So they've been very welcoming. We've had a great time setting up operations in Texas. We love Texas, and I think you're seeing now all of our competitors following us to that area.
Yeah, it certainly has been. A lot of this activity has shifted to the Texas Triangle, especially, but throughout the state. One thing I wanted to bring up was a recent announcement at Kodiak. Your company conducted a test demonstration showing how its autonomous driving system can bring the truck to a controlled, safe stop in the event of a steer tire blowout. Right, so we're kind of getting into the nitty gritty of all these details, the technical details. Well, okay, if you're going to remove the driver, you better be prepared for all these eventualities and all these situations that can happen out on the road. And really, maybe it doesn't sound like the most exciting thing on the surface, but I think it's emblematic of how autonomous truck development has advanced beyond simply proving out the concepts, where we started our conversation, to now really addressing those practical details of how to truly make this work in the real world. So, Don, what were you hoping to show with that demonstration, and what does it say about the state of autonomous truck development?
Well, we think is really exciting. And just earlier this summer, we were the first company to demonstrate safe pullover to the side of the road with our autonomy system. So before I get to the steer tire blowout,
Sure.
I think it's important to understand where we were coming from. Our system is currently monitoring over 1,000 diagnostics on the truck. So not just things like tire temperature, tire pressure, but sensor health, integrity, data integrity, how all the internal diagnostics of the autonomy system, but also the platform, the engine temperature, oil temperature, tire pressure, tire temperature, and things like that. If any one of those values goes outside of allowable bands, our proprietary embedded control system that we call the ACE is able to take over and safely pull that truck over to the side of the road. So we demonstrated that earlier this summer. And of course, the very next question we got was, okay, that's all fine and great when all your tires are functioning, but what happens when you have a tire blowout? And so, of course, that was already on our roadmap and something we had been preparing for and working on for a long time. But what we wanted to demonstrate is that the high fidelity and capability of the autonomy control system was able to handle those critically important situations. Obviously, when a steer tire blows out, it can become a really safety critical situation very quickly. And what we wanted to show is that our control system that we've been developing on the Kodiak driver is able to handle those situations. We not only tested steer tire blowout, but we tested all kinds of other tire pressure degradations. Of course, steer tire being the most important one, and that's really why we demonstrated that publicly in the announcement that we made. But the important takeaway, and what I want everybody to understand, is that our system can react 10 times faster than a human driver in that situation and can immediately apply the inputs needed to keep control of the vehicle, right? So even an alert human for an uninspected event can take over a second to analyze the situation and react. Our truck reacts in less than a tenth of a second. That's what we were able to show. And I think that is really significant, not just for the safety of self-driving vehicles, but for the safety of our roadways in general. And so not only are we able to match performance of the best drivers, I think we're able to really push it to the next level to maintain safety for all motorway users.
Yeah. And again, I think it's, all those little details are so important. So,
Absolutely.
again, I think it shows that, we've come, pretty far, even though if we're not at any sort of, broad commercialization of the technology, doesn't mean there's been hasn't been a lot of progress along the way to get to where we are now. Uh, Now, whenever we talk about autonomous trucks, I always want to take time to talk about what the technology will mean for professional truck drivers. I think that's an important part of the conversation. To me, I think it's pretty clear that human truck drivers are going to be essential for the foreseeable future. Not all truck routes and freight types and business operations are going to be well suited to automation. But again, that's my perspective. Don, tell me how you see this technology playing out in the trucking industry. Do you envision a mix of automation and human labor in the future? And do you even see the potential for driving jobs in the industry to improve and evolve in some sense through the use of automation?
I think you're exactly right. That's how we see it at Kodiak. First off, you have to recognize that there's a massive driver shortage for over the road truck drivers. That's not to say that there are no drivers that want to do that job. Of course, there are some great drivers out there. Some of them absolutely love truck driving, but the demand for moving freight is just increasing year over year over year, and we're not able to backfill those jobs with enough human drivers. And so, really, we want to focus on what is generally considered to be, although not always, but generally considered to be the least exciting, least interesting aspect of this industry, which is that really ultra long haul over the road. It's harder to hire. It's harder to find drivers that really want to do that, even though there are some. We're just not keeping up with the demand. But as you said, I think for the foreseeable future, I'm talking decades, we're going to see humans in the loop with this technology, either driving regional routes, more urban centers, first and last mile. They're going to continue to do some routes that are long haul over the road, and it's going to be a really slow, gradual rollout of self-driving technology. A lot of people think they're going to wake up one morning and poof, we're going to find out that millions of trucks are all of a sudden automated and everybody's out of the job. I think that's completely unrealistic. That's not the plan that we have. I don't think that's the plan that the industry has. This is going to be a really slow, geographically specific rollout over time. And as you said, I think that we're actually going to be able to increase jobs. We're going to be able to increase the efficiency of the assets of the trucks. We're going to be able to move more freight on the long haul, which is going to create more jobs on the shorter regional drives. And so, yeah, it's not something that I think that people should be as concerned about. If anything, I think we can have a positive effect on the market.
Yeah. That's a very helpful perspective because sometimes there is some angst and some of it does feel unwarranted or not reflective of where the technology development is really headed. So I do appreciate that. And one other question that's always tough to answer is the time frame for this. And I know it's difficult to project specific dates on when this technology will be ready for full commercial deployment or how quickly it might scale up. But from a development standpoint, when will you know when the technology is ready, and what obstacles do you see still in the way that you'll need to overcome to reach that point?
Yeah, it's always hard to pick a specific day. I like to say, oh, it'll happen on a Thursday sometime in the month, but that's not reality, right? We'll know we're ready when we've completed our safety case checklist, and that's really the only answer that makes sense. And anybody who gives you a different answer is I think giving you the wrong one. And that safety case involves statistical benchmarking against human driving capabilities across the variety of scenarios that we see on the road, both in the real world, also in simulation, and things that we can test at our test track, as we talked about before. It also involves proving out the redundancy of the system. So we have a ton of sensors around our vehicles: cameras, LiDAR, radar. We have multiple compute systems. We have multiple control systems. So we have multiple controllers that can steer the truck, bring the truck to a safe stop. What we need and have been working with the industry on is redundant actuation platform. So think about redundant paths to braking, redundant controls for steering. If we lose the steering wheel or if we lose the brakes, you can have the best autonomy system in the world, but it's not going to make a difference, right? Yeah. So we have to make sure that redundancy is there across the entire stack, from the sensors all the way to the braking system, and ultimately the tires where the rubber hits the road, as they say. And once we've been able to do the analysis to confirm that, yes, under all circumstances, we feel confident that the Kodiak driver is going to be able to handle each and every one of those scenarios safely, then we'll be ready to deploy that. And I think it's going to happen in the next couple of years. We've made a ton of progress, and we're getting very, very close.
Okay. No, thank you for that guidance. And final question to leave you on, Don. And we touched on this a little bit earlier, but I think it goes without saying that there's been a lot of hype, a lot of excitement about autonomous trucking over the past several years. Along the way, I think also maybe some misperceptions about the technology, what it does mean, what it doesn't mean. So before I let you go, are there any maybe myths or misunderstandings about autonomous trucking that you'd like to address?
Yeah, I think the probably most prevalent one we actually already touched on, which is that this is going to displace a bunch of drivers and people are going to lose a bunch of jobs. I think that is really a myth that is worth hammering on. I think this is a symbiotic technology that is going to aid and assist the carriers. It's going to augment the existing system. It's not going to put people out of work. And then the other one is just the safety of the overall system. A lot of people think, oh, it's never going to happen. It's not possible. What happens under this circumstance or what happens under that circumstance? And the truth of the matter is we're ticking those boxes off. One of the big ones was what happens if a tire blows out. People couldn't conceive that an autonomous system could possibly handle that scenario. And we've been able to show that not only is it possible, but it's actually better than human performance. So I think it's about education. We need to keep having conversations like this. We need to keep pushing on the technology, making it better, making it safer, and ultimately, I think we'll be able to win people over.
Yeah. Well, Don, I really appreciate you taking the time today to chat with us. It's been a great conversation, very insightful, of course, and it's also been fascinating to watch your company and also some of your competitors in this emerging field that does have a lot of promise, and we'll be watching it very closely, of course, in the months and years ahead.
Yeah, it's a really exciting field. I think it's been a long time coming, and for those of us who've been here a long time, I'm very, very excited about where we are and what the next few years hold. So it's great chatting with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks again, Don.
When we return, TT Managing Features Editor Seth Clevenger and Wabi's Vivian Sun. More about autonomous adoption and safety practices. And CEO and co-founder of Apex AI, Jan Becker, gives us the inside scoop on autonomous driving. Stay tuned.
I'm excited to introduce the Transport Topics magazine event series. These one-of-a-kind learning sessions bring to life the people and conversations behind the trucking equipment and technology. I'm Dan Ronan. I'm your host and the voice of Transport Topics Radio. I'm joined by our managing editor for features, Seth Clevenger, features editor, Michael Fries, and executive editor, Joe Howard. Each quarter, we're also joined by an industry sponsor. I'm excited to be part of the Transport Topics magazine event series. I hope to see you there.
Back when Transport Topics published the first issue of iTech in 2001, the industry was really in a very different place, and so was transportation technology. And back then, the talk was all about CD-ROMs, the information superhighway, and the rise of .com companies. That was all new at the time. Trucking companies back then were really worried about open communications with their drivers, software to track revenue by the mile, and just greater visibility on web searches, for example. And the software and the technology of the time was almost regarded as an aid to the business, but not necessarily as a core part of a company's operations. Now, when you fast forward to the present, and it's really amazing how far we've come. All kinds of data makes its way seamlessly from the truck out on the road, back to the company's back office, to really inform dispatchers and fleet managers and unlock new levels of efficiency. Business processes are becoming increasingly automated, drivers are supported by an array of advanced safety technologies, and we're really just scratching the surface of this. So when you look back at that first issue of iTech, it really is remarkable just how much trucking technology has evolved over the years. We've really seen a tremendous amount of growth and innovation in the transportation technology space over the past decade or so. The industry's technology suppliers have really just continuously developed new software applications and telematics capabilities to drive the industry forward. And we've seen that from well-established technology vendors as well as startup companies that have jumped into this business. At the same time, truck manufacturers have introduced connected vehicle technology like remote diagnostics, which is now standard, along with more advanced driver assist technologies and even electric-powered truck models. And more trucking and logistics companies are investing in those innovations and actually putting them to use. Trucking executives who may not have started as technology experts are now talking about machine learning and business process automation as ways to really improve their businesses. Transportation companies realize that they need to understand how technology is transforming this industry if they want to keep pace with these changes and stay a step ahead of their competitors. That's when we started to rethink iTech and our technology content at Transport Topics. We really wanted to dial into that need for executives to keep up with trucking technology and what it really means for their businesses. And that involves understanding the existing technologies that are already on the market and in many instances becoming commonplace, as well as the emerging technologies that could shake up the industry in the future. Of course, this technology content is valuable for fleet technology experts, the CIOs and CTOs of the world, but we also want it to be informative and accessible for managers and decision makers of all stripes throughout the industry. No matter your title or your organization, it's helpful to better understand topics like ELDs, telematics, trends in transportation management software, machine learning, cybersecurity, blockchain, and even automated driving. And now we've refined that kind of thinking even further. This new iTech doesn't dwell on every technology trend. It focuses on the ones that executives and decision makers in the transportation industry really need to consider. We've distilled this content in ways that will help you more effectively manage your business today and also plan ahead for the future. Because you can't afford to ignore the trends and technologies that are just emerging today, but will become a prerequisite tomorrow. When we consider how much has changed in the past 20 years since we first published iTech, it's fascinating to imagine how the advance of technology will transform our industry in the next 20 years. Read iTech to follow this evolution every step of the way.
Next up is Road Signs. Host Seth Clevenger first interviews Vivian Sun, Chief Commercial Officer at Wabi. And later in the program, he talks with Jan Becker, CEO and co-founder of Apex AI.
Next on Automate, I'm very excited to bring in Vivian Sun, Chief Commercial Officer at self-driving truck startup Wabi. Thanks for joining us, Vivian.
Thank you for having me.
So for our iTech magazine just recently, I compiled a list of more than a dozen startups and tech companies that are actively working today to develop various forms of automated driving technology for commercial trucks. So it's a pretty crowded field at this point, and the majority of those companies I found were founded 4 to 7 years ago. So still a pretty young, emerging space, but the majority of the companies have been out in the field for a while now. Wabi, though, is a younger company founded in 2021. So again, considering that this is a somewhat crowded field, tell us how Wabi is taking a different approach than some of the other developers that have had a head start.
Thank you for the question. And then I read your piece. It was super well done. So yeah, as you said, this is a space that actually grab a lot of attention, and people start to realize that automation will start with trucking and starting with trucking at large. So the industry definitely have made tremendous progress, and that fact, of self-driving trucking utilizing the technology is one testament of that. And I personally have been in this space for, this is my 6th or 7th year in this space. I personally have witnessed a lot of the growth that we have experienced together as an industry. When I first joined industry, the question was if this is real, if it's ready, if this is something for us. Now the question is where, when, how many. So the people are definitely shifting a lot of their perspective from the old days to how do we utilize the technology to better assist my business. But one thing we have noticed, and then you have a question about why we joining in 2021 is, with all the progress we've seen in the market, we still don't have a product on the market, right? We are still in testing phase, pilot, if you may, a lot of things going on, but we don't have a scalable scalable product to the market today. So that's why this is actually a perfect opportunity for Wabi to join, to offer a next generation AV 2.0, if you may, to solve the problem at scale with a much, much lower cost, right? So this actually is a perfect timing since the market is much more educated, as we talk about, but also craving for a new solution that is much more open, collaborative, right? People now really crave a solution, not only from a technology perspective, but also from a partnership perspective. Can we be open, transparent about the technology so we can bring customer along with the journey? And then we have talked about in many occasions that Wabi is AI first and simulation first. So these are the things and attributes to our technology that are completely new and different from the last cohort, if you may. So we're super excited, and we believe this is actually perfect timing to give the market even more excitement to showcase the strength of our technology and the benefit of self-driving at large.
Yeah. Well, I think back to, say 2015, 2016, and, I do remember when this was a very futuristic idea. It didn't seem like something that was right around the corner. And, it's proven to be a challenge to develop this technology. And I'd argue that perhaps some analysts and the outside observers maybe underestimated the technical challenge, because it is a great technical challenge. But that being said, to your point, much more real, much more tangible today with the development work that's taken place. And, many trucking companies, of course, are involved in pilots and testing, and are I think, more interested in this than they were several years ago. I want to pick up on one of the points you made about Wabi, really describing its development process as an AI first approach.
Yep.
And I know there's a focus on developing a virtual driver that can generalize and apply what it's learned to situations and scenarios it hasn't seen before. Kind of getting to the quintessential challenge of edge cases in self-driving, where there's all these rare events that can happen out on the road. that perhaps you'll never be able to predict everything that can happen. So you have to be able to find a way to respond to that. But Vivian, could you just tell us a little bit more about this AI first approach to autonomous driving, and what does it mean in a practical sense as you get this technology ready?
Yeah, great question. And we definitely proud ourselves as an AI first and AI company. That really is originated from our founder and CEO, Raquel. She has over 20 years of experience in AI field, self-driving, and really has been pushing the envelope for many years as a successful entrepreneur, successful scientist, and academia. Professor as well. So I think this really originated from her decades of experience and her team pushing the technology, right? Really helping the industry moving forward. What it means to be AI first is really leveraging deep learning, probabilistic inference, and complex optimization. I know that's very a mouthful, but I'm sure Raquel has a lot of deep technology behind it. What that results to us is an end-to-end trainable system that is interpretable and capable of very complex reasoning. And you have covered our Wabi driver launch just a couple of weeks ago, which is our core product. The Wabi driver really is benefiting the Wabi driver really benefited from the AI first approach that brings into the technology a lot of powerful attributes, if you may. So first of all, I think we talk about the end-to-end trainable solution, which really means that it can be automatically learning from data and speeding up development and enable it to handle complex decision making, right? So that's first of the attributes. Secondly, it's interpretable. When people hear about AI first, the first question they pop into their head is, oh, is it a black box? Actually, this is not a black box. It's contrary to that. We have combined the two best of the best, right? From the old generation, which is interpretable, and then the AI, which is much more automation, right? So putting the two together, our system actually interpretable. We are able to track every single decision it makes so that the regulators, for example, our customers, able to validate, and also helps out with the whole VME process. And we talk about the scalability, right? So our system definitely boasts around its superior generalization capabilities. We're able to capture a lot of the decision making, capture a lot of the processes in our autonomous system, autonomous stack, if you may, that even before the system hit the road, we're able to handle very different geographic locations, different use cases. And that is really the bottom line of how to self-driving, the long tail of self-driving, if you may. And lastly, I think the self-driving system we are building, the Wabi driver, is very flexible. One of the pain point I think you have may heard in the industry is the how to keep up the hardware and software together, right? You develop this hardware, probably a year-long time of developing it, designing it, putting the truck. Now it become outdated when you have a software that is even newer generation. So the AI first approach or the Wabi driver system actually is very flexible in that perspective. We're able to combine our self-driving development from software perspective and hardware together very, very nicely and very organically. So our system can be adaptable to multiple sensor configuration. We're also able to include and incorporate new sensors or new technologies from a hardware perspective coming out of the line. So we're able to always innovating, always pushing the envelope as we talk about. So that would be a really key differentiator. And that's why the industry was super excited about the Wabi driver launch. And we're also just trucking along and hoping to and working really hard to make sure that the Wabi driver benefit is realized with our partners.
Yeah. And another aspect of Wabi's technology development that I find quite fascinating is the focus on simulation. So Wabi has built a simulator called Wabi World to test and train the autonomous driving system. How to handle various situations the vehicle might encounter out on the road. You can test and see how it's working. So a lot of the testing is happening in simulation rather than out on the road. Physically, there's clearly there'll be some of that too, but a lot of that's being done more on the front end on the simulation side. So could you just provide us more detail on how you're using simulation to test and develop your virtual driver?
Absolutely. We're very proud of our simulator, the Wabi World. And I love the name. It's actually pretty clever, don't you think?
Sounds like a
It's
theme park, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You have the real world, you have the Wabi world, and we're able to prove actually the Wabi world is very similar and if not the same as the real world. So I think we could talk about the pain point of industry today is this large amount of capital, right? You need it, and thousands of people in the organization, and millions of miles on the road. You need to test and validate your system, which have proven out to be a pretty cumbersome process and sometimes even unsafe. So I think the Wabi world really leveraging the benefit of a very, very powerful industry most advanced simulator to be able to really address these pain points, right? We're able to create the real world through a very realistic digital twin process and really at the cost of fracture of the cost you're running the vehicle on the road. Also, the other benefit you mentioned, the corner cases, right? Your system, as it gets better, is even harder and harder to find these corner cases. Sometimes you may take hundreds of vehicles on the road for millions of miles, and many years to do that. So the Wabi world definitely speed that process by able to do the parallel processings and simulation of different scenarios, different geographic locations, different weathers, for example, in simulation. And that resulted into a much more cost-efficient process, much more safer, and to be honest, much more rapid development to release our system to the road. So we're really proud of it. However, you also mentioned real world driving. I want to mention that we're not just limited to our simulator, our Wabi world, as long as powerful as it is, we also have the real world component. So how do we use the real world combined with our simulator is that we will do a big bulk of our development testing, if you may, in our simulator. And when we release the system to the road, it's much more complicated and that's much more safe to be released. So the real world driving to us is more and more validation verification if people are familiar with the automotive processes. So really that's the final step when you have a product that's more mature and ready for, I would say, last bit of tweaks and changes. And that's exactly how we use the real world driving. And as you know, that's going to be benefiting to all of us in terms of being much safer and being much more cost efficient. So overall, if you think about a pyramid, traditionally you're doing a lot of the real world driving, right? A little bit of course testing, a little bit of simulation. We're doing flipping that pyramid, right? We're doing a lot of simulation. We're doing very significant close course testing. And then when we release to the road, the real world driving is relatively small portion of our process. But with that being said, we're still incorporating all the three elements of a normal development process.
Yeah, well, thank you for that overview. And like I said, it is an interesting, unique approach to developing the technology. And I also want to take a little bit of time to talk about deployment models and business cases for autonomous trucks, because different companies are pursuing different use cases. They're applying the technology in different ways. In Wabi's case, you're focused on fully autonomous unmanned operation in hub-to-hub routes, mainly highway driving, but on these hub-to-hub routes. Why do you see that as the right starting point for autonomous trucking?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I just want to say I'm super proud of the progress we made in industry, and trucking really is, in general, a first area where automation will be commercialized. And the reason we choose the hub-to-hub business model or use case, if you may, is really because of that's where we have the best fit between technology, commercialization, as well as the customer need, right? So we can talk about the three buckets separately. From a technology perspective, the hub-to-hub miles or hub-to-hub business model really capture the long stretch of highway, right? These routes are more repetitive. So the highway from, let's say, Arizona, Texas, or California is not so different than Florida or New York City, even though there are differences, obviously, that we are going to address. And the AI first approach is going to enable us to be better at the generalization. But you can argue that it's very relatively constrained environment versus driving in let's say a condensed urban center, right? So that actually limits the different technology challenges we need to solve to make that happen. So from a technology perspective, that's definitely a great use case. From a commercial perspective, trucking is a 800 billion market, and this is really one area where technology can benefit the most. So we believe this is also the hub to hub really capture a lot of different use cases as well, right? So you have the over the road, you have the LTLs, you have the private fleet. So these are the areas we believe our customer are really arguing they want to have this technology. Number three, as we talk about the value, right? Why do we need to commercialize in the hub to hub business model? So we believe that this is one area where the driver shortage is the most severe, right? The over the road trucking is very challenging for a lot of the driver to be on the road for months at a time. So this is also where the area the drivers are much needed, and where the fleet owners are having the most challenge to find these drivers. So there are a lot of unrealized revenue, and this is actually the area where the pain points are most severe. So combining that 3 points, we believe the hub to hub would be really perfect use case for Wabi to tackle first, and then to encourage adoption and to demonstrate the technology benefit and to prove out the unit economics of self-driving.
Yeah, for sure. And it's, I think, fascinating to think about the potential for autonomous trucks to handle certain long haul lanes, and that could potentially shift more driving jobs more toward regional and local pickup and delivery. And when you project forward and think about that next generation of truck drivers, possibly with a different sense of work life balance and maybe a higher prioritization on home time, it
Yes.
starts the pieces start to fit together quite well. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. But I did want to go back to one of the topics we started talking about a little bit earlier in the conversation, and that's just sort of how far we've come over the last, say, 7 years or so.
Yeah.
Vivian, of course, you were a vice president at Too Simple before you joined Wabi. Too Simple, of course, is one of the earlier startups that has since gone public, and one of those dozen plus companies that's in this space today. But when you think back to again, say 2016 or so, and all the demonstrations and investment, testing, fleet pilots we've seen, autonomous trucking seems more real than ever. And again, we haven't reached commercial deployment, at any scale. So I guess, from your perspective, having been working on this challenge for, a number of years now, how much has the conversation changed in the industry? And how much closer are we to the sort of that end goal and reaching that vision of autonomous trucking in certain elements of the trucking industry?
Yeah, I think you yourself also have witnessed the growth of the industry, along with me and many other people who are passionate about the industry. And I would say the change is tremendous. The change is something that we're able to witness in a short amount of time. Don't get me wrong, this is a very long time in self-driving, but in the normal years of any evolvement, this is really rapid. So as I talk about, when I first joined the industry, the conversation was about if, and now is about when and how many. And I'm not joking about it. And in my career, I have met and worked closely with so many business leaders, CEOs, executives, maintenance staff, right? So every single element of a trucking operation, people are extremely curious and extremely passionate about the benefit and what could change industry for the better. So, for example, right, when we first joined the industry, people are more focusing on, the self-driving technology and what does it mean for a lot of us. Now, I think you've seen a lot of different partnership in terms of integration, right? So people kind of assume is going to happen, and we're talking about how do we integrate it? What does it mean for our infrastructure? What does it mean for our insurance providers? What does it mean for our service staff, right? So a lot of the things need to happen in order to make a technology successful. So I think people are now in the mode of problem solving as a collective industry, and I'm super super excited to see more of that as well, right? So that is really a testament to seeing the shift. Now people are more concerned about, oh my god, if the technology comes in certain amount of time, am I ready? Am I from an executive level to the manager level to the staff on the floor in, let's say, Dallas, San Antonio, or many different cities? How do I make sure my organization is ready for this change, what I call change management? So that's really why Wabi, I think, believes in the openness and transparency, and also bring customer to the journey, right? Because I think we all can recognize the industry does make really great progress in the last couple of years, but we can do better in terms of bringing people along for the journey and open up under the hood and see, how do I help people, how do I let other people to help us. So that's something myself and the Wabi team is very, very passionate about. Is we want to be able to extremely be open, transparent, and say, okay, fleet owners, executives, maintenance staff, can you help us to understand what does it mean to be running autonomous fleet? And then together we can design something that can help you to be ready for the future. So that's something I think the industry will be also continuously focusing on in the next 2 to 3 years, to be ready for that change as an industry and as an organization.
Sure. Also, when you look out on maybe the near term horizon, there are some challenges, I think, with overall business conditions, not just for self driving technology, but really for the economy as a whole. Most analysts are predicting at least a mild recession next year. And then specifically in the autonomous vehicle space, there is some pessimism out there, and I think that we've seen longer than expected timelines from some companies. A lot of that in the passenger car space, focused on getting to commercialization. And as we mentioned earlier, it's not such an easy thing to do, right? It takes time to prepare technology like this. Argo AI shutting down is another example. But how can autonomous vehicle developers like Wabi maybe change perceptions and move closer to commercialization despite some of those potential headwinds I just listed?
Yeah, definitely. There is certainly a headwind and maybe winter, if you may, that's going around in the market. And I'm not going to lie, the industry is encountering a fair share of challenges and certain challenges, right, in different areas. And we believe that a lot of the challenges or people's pessimistic view about the industry kind of is originated from the AV 1.0 view may that we talk about the industry challenges as a whole, right, is very much capital intensive, and we haven't been able to be more generalized and much quicker in our development. So from a Wabi perspective, I think there are still a lot of excitement from self-driving, particularly for the 2.0, if you may, the newer companies who are bringing the next generation technology. People want to see, what does it mean, right? People want to see, can it be a changing factor? And we believe it is. So that's why we launched Wabi Driver a couple of weeks ago, where also spurred out a lot of new discussions. Oh, there are new generation, new technology coming. So maybe this is something that we can really utilize and be much more quicker with our deployment and much more different than the last cohort. The other thing from a Wabi perspective is, from a fundraising perspective, we usually raise a big round so we can last for a longer period of time. We have a bigger runway, and in the last phase of the industry, people didn't have the luxury, right? You have to fundraise kind of every year, and you have to do incremental changes to your technology, doing demos. So it kind of had to be that way. So we're in a better position, so we can have a longer time horizon. We can design and define our product, let's say 2 to 3 years from now, and going backwards, right, to really step by step, really realizing the milestone to get there. So I think that's also a new, different approach, and people really appreciate that. And at the end of the day, is about the investment you put into it, and then the benefit you can come out of it. So we're still very bullish, and as you can see, the users of technology are still very bullish. The OEMs are still bullish. The industry who are part of the ecosystem are still bullish. So I think at the end of the day, we can ride through this period of time, and coming out of it, become much more stronger and giving the industry much more confidence. So that's something I'm personally also very passionate about, is how do we keep talking about and bring new perspective of the benefit of the technology, so together we can elevate the industry to make sure that we're still kind of moving forward together.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And one other topic I wanted to bring up, whenever we have a conversation about fully autonomous trucks, I always do like to take some time to discuss what the technology will mean and won't mean for professional truck drivers. Of course, that's a question that's been out there, and I think a lot of hype, and maybe even some misinformation out there about what the reality is. Personally, I think it's helpful to think of autonomous trucks as a new mode of transportation. And I've heard you say that before as well. that can ultimately complement drivers rather than just eliminate their jobs, right? In fact, I mean, I mentioned this earlier, but if you automate some long haul routes, you could actually improve driving jobs for the next generation, and kind of craft jobs that are better suited to the preferences of the next generation of the workforce. But that's my perspective. Tell us how you envision automation and professional drivers working together in the future, and how might this actually help the trucking industry create jobs that are more appealing to future truck drivers?
Yes, thank you. I love this question, and I love interacting and having a good time with our drivers in general. I was just at the Women in Trucking event a couple of weeks ago in Dallas, and seen so many passionate and just lovely people all over the board. So this is one topic that I think a lot of us have contributing to this conversation, and I completely agree with you, right? That's why we want to automate the hub top miles, where really you're out there as a driver months at a time, where you're far away from your home, right? So the home time is really important as a whole in the industry. So exactly like you said, right? If the autonomous truck can be the middle mile, or can take on these tedious and long stretch of highway, and then the human drivers can really be kind of assigned to first mile, last mile, or the pickup and delivery, right? Local pickup and delivery. That definitely contributed to better lifestyle overall. Where they can go back home every day, and together as a cohesive, organization or cohesive ecosystem, we can, be better for a better supply chain, better, lifestyle for the drivers, and overall more efficient. And we believe that this is complementary to the drivers. And we talk about the rollout of self-driving is going to be gradual, right? At different regions, at different pace. So throughout that process, we can build a very collaborative approach to the driver community on how do we work together as a whole. And one thing, as you know, I'm also talk about here is we want to also invite our drivers or the driver community as a whole to help us develop a better product. So we don't want to build a autonomous truck or autonomous driver, in the dark, where there's so much wealth from the driver community that they can share with us. So that's one thing we believe we should do better as a whole, is to incorporate them into the processes, build a relationship that's collaborative, right? Instead of contradictory to each other. It is also something we need as an industry, as a self-driving company, to learn from the best of the best driver out there. They can teach us to make a better and safer system. So yeah, we believe that if a driver want to enter a workforce today as a truck driver, they can retire as one, because it's going to be a hybrid mode for many, many years. And together, this is all for the better logistics system, and they can also enjoy the benefit of self-driving as a driver force as well.
Yeah, and that's very helpful, and I appreciate that conversation, because even to this day, I think there's been a lot of knowledge gained, and more nuance around the conversation, but it's still a question that comes up a lot, and I think it's important that we always discuss that. But before I let you go, Vivian, I just wanted to take a moment to ask you, what's next for Wabi as you move toward commercialization in the future? What technical and business obstacles do you still need to overcome, as you move forward, and when will you know when the technology is ready for commercial deployment with truck manufacturers and fleet customers?
Yeah, great question. That's a great way to summarize that conversation. I think in the Wabi driver launch, we mentioned we believe in pre-factory installation, right? We want to work with OEMs to integrate our Wabi driver system at the factory level. We believe that's the only way you can do this, roll out safely, reliably at scale. So that's something we're super passionate about, right? It's something that we are working very collaboratively with the industry. That's also one of the biggest milestones, I would say, for us and for our OEM partners, is to be able to finish that integration, complete all the tests necessary to make sure that we release a safety product to the road. The other thing very important for Wabi is to be able to continuously proven out our technology. Now we have announced Wabi Driver. Really, we want to be able to showcase continuously the benefit and the differentiator of Wabi Driver. We talk about a lot of the the generalization capabilities, cost efficiency, right, the scalability. These are the things we need to come back to the industry with proof, and then continuously elevate industry and inject more confidence, as we talked before. So overall, right, collaboration with the industry, proving out the technology, and then integrating with the OEMs. So that's going to be a theme across the next few years, and we're very excited to show the world what we have planned for the future.
All right. Well, it'll be fun to watch. Thank you very much for taking the time for this conversation, Vivian. I always enjoy hearing your insights and having the conversation. So thanks again for joining us.
Thank you so much. That's been great, and thank you for all the thoughtful questions.
All right. Great. Next on Automate, I'm very excited to speak with an autonomous driving pioneer, Jan Becker, who's currently CEO and co-founder of Apex AI, which provides software development kits for driver assist and autonomous driving systems. So thank you for joining the program, Jan. I'm really eager to get into this.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks for having me.
So during the past several years, we've seen a lot of progress in the development and testing of autonomous driving technology, specifically for the trucking industry. But it's clear that it's not a simple task to move past that R&D stage and reach full commercial production in real significant volumes. So from your perspective, what will it take for autonomous driving system developers to kind of cross that hurdle and bring their technology to market?
Mm-hmm. So the final development of any technology, but specifically pertaining to driver assistance autonomous driving, is always the hard part. It's this 80-20 rule, where in the first 20% of the time you make 80% of the progress, and at the end the S curve becomes very flat, and it takes a lot of additional time to simply robustify technology, to harden technology, to make sure all the different corner cases are addressed, and that's exactly the phase we are currently in. We as a development community, with respect to making autonomous driving robust and reliable.
Yeah, so that I think that one example of that would be edge cases. We hear so much about planning for the unexpected events and the very rare scenarios you might encounter out on the road. That's usually identified as one of the key technical barriers for deploying this technology on public roads. Just kind of speaking to your 80-20 rule. Do you feel like those edge cases are a big part of that when it comes to autonomous driving?
Of course, and ultimately we need to design our system such that, with keeping in mind that we will never be able to fully, in advance, be able to identify all edge cases and all corner cases, but we then need to design the systems such that they always default into a safe state. They can also deal with internal errors. There will always be parts of the system, like a sensor, that may fail, or external events may happen, from a rock hitting the windscreen, to a flat tire, to a sensor malfunctioning. And again, the key is then to design a system such that the overall system maintains and retains some kind of operational level, despite parts of the system seeing a failure or having some kind of other outage. So it overall pertains to designing a safe and reliable overall system and dealing with individual errors.
For sure. And I think that, generally speaking, maybe if you rewind the clock 5, 6, 7 years, perhaps some of the observers maybe underestimated the technical challenge of autonomous driving. This is not easy. This is very difficult, and that's played out, I think, in the real world with the testing and development that continues to this day. So I want to talk a little bit more about your company, Apex AI. So you're providing software development kits for ADAS and autonomous driving technology, with this focus on enabling software-defined vehicles. So just tell us what that means, and why is that important for AV development?
Sure. AV developers are typically expert in their specific domain. So in the trucking case, they know how to address long haul trucking or last mile delivery, or robo shuttles or robo taxis or ADAS development. So they are very much focused on their specific domain and their specific use case. We develop base software for software-defined vehicles that essentially consist of a set of libraries that are robust, reliable, and safety certified that take care of all the underlying base software needs. So that ranges from reading in data from sensors to starting processes, transporting data between the sensors and the processor, between processors on one SoC, between SoCs, between ECUs, and doing over-the-air update, doing firmware updates. So all the base software needs that all software-defined vehicles, all software-defined mobility systems ultimately need, and such that it's hardware agnostic, it's vehicle agnostic, it's chipset agnostic. So we're really taking the software challenges out of the equation for the integrators, for the autonomous trucking companies, for the autonomous delivery companies, for the robotaxi companies, and so on and so on.
Certainly, and I know the core topic of this conversation is, of course, fully autonomous trucks, but I also want to take a little bit of time to talk about advanced driver assist systems, or ADAS. I think that when you look at the scope of how automation can uh, enter and expand in the trucking industry, autonomous trucks are going to be designed for specific use cases, at least initially, like hub to hub routes on specific lanes, maybe private site operations, terminals, industrial sites. But ADAS technology, that's technology that can potentially improve safety for just about any truck on the road, because it's assisting the driver, not replacing the driver. Uh, so just looking ahead and kind of projecting, technology development in the years ahead, do you see parallel markets emerging for ADAS and, what we call level 4 autonomy, with, full autonomy, but designed for a specific domain? And where do you see both ADAS and full autonomy being deployed in the trucking industry?
Mm-hmm. So from a technology perspective, there are obviously commonalities. So both ADAS and level 4 autonomy use at least partially similar or identical sensors, such as radar sensors, such as cameras, and so on. But from a business perspective, they actually do address different markets. So ADAS, obviously, as you also pointed it out, still needs and relies on the driver, and then provides additional safety features or convenience features to that driver. So either making it more convenient, for instance, in the case of an adaptive cruise control system, to just drive long haul trucks over extended periods of time. Safety features such as forward collision warning or automatic emergency braking then assist the drivers in dangerous situations, whereas level 4 autonomy takes completely the load away from the driver, either for periods of the drive or the complete drive. So, for instance, I can easily imagine a human driver and an autonomous driving system complementing each other for long haul trucking, where the autonomous system completely drives the truck on the freeway at night, whereas then the driver takes care of driving it onto the freeway back into the dock, for instance.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to consider all the different ways that the technology can play out, because there are so many opportunities to build on today's driver assist capabilities, collision mitigation, adaptive cruise control, and expand it from there with steering assistance and more capable
Mm-hmm.
assistance, while still relying on the driver in that case. You know, of course, I mentioned level 4 earlier, so we're already getting into these
Mm-hmm.
levels of autonomy that I think there's been kind of this widespread education in the trucking industry as some of these technologies have been in development, and in some cases with ADAS commercially available. What are these levels and what do they mean? Just sort of a way to understand the not just a scale, but the different levels of capabilities that some of these technologies bring. And so it happens, Jan, you were one of the original authors of these SAE levels of automated driving, that we talk about. So I thought it'd be fun to ask, for you to look back, over the years that have passed. How has the AV industry evolved, compared to what you envisioned at the time? Putting together these levels of automation to kind of put a framework together to understand capabilities, and then look at what we've seen so far in terms of development. Has it played out at all similar to what you had envisioned, or has anything surprised you?
So that actually started. I'm glad you asked. That actually started almost 10 years ago in 2012. And then I think it was over the course of almost 2 years that we iterated in a working group on developing the first set of taxonomy for autonomous driving levels, which then launched as an SAE report in 2014. And I think there have been 3 or 4 iterations since. So back then, there was a lot of hype around level 4 and robotaxis, and a lot of companies and experts and analysts predicted literally millions of robotaxis driving around within 5 years, which would have been 2-3 years ago.
Yeah.
And clearly, if I look outside my window here in the middle of Silicon Valley, I don't see a million robotaxis yet, even though we've actually made quite some progress in the last couple of years. And I think just a month ago, Cruise announced that they've significantly increased their operational range in San Francisco, and Waymo has at around the same time expanded their area of operations also in San Francisco, which shows that they are, as we talked about earlier, that they are now able to address a lot of the corner cases they weren't able to more recently. At the same time, we see though that there has been quite a selection in the field. So a lot of the companies that were able to get funding years ago are not getting funding anymore, which to me is simply a sense of the industry becoming more mature, the field narrowing down to just a couple of players, which is actually a natural selection process, where both investors and analysts are more confident that they can actually nail it and solve the overall challenge.
Yeah. Oh, you mentioned robo-taxis, and of course, to your point, that is a reality in some very specific cases now. It's not everywhere, but and it took a little bit longer than perhaps analysts would have imagined years ago. But sometimes, that vision comes true. It just takes longer than originally anticipated. But along the way, over the past several years, I think it's fair to say that we've seen some of the energy and investment in autonomous vehicle development shift from the passenger car space over to commercial applications, especially trucking. So what's your perspective on the viability of autonomous cars versus heavy trucks? And where do you see autonomous vehicles having a real impact on a large scale the soonest?
So overall, what we are seeing is that what I and experts have been saying for years, that the development of a full self-driving stack is just a huge endeavor. And the companies that are trying to address the full stack, from building their own sensors to building their own ECUs, some of them now are developing their own chips for machine learning based systems, up to the full application. That's just a huge task which takes billions of dollars of investment. Having that said, the companies that are willing to partner and willing to take outside solutions to reduce their own internal development effort are actually now the ones, except for like very early adopters like Tesla, who were simply first to market. But the companies that are now willing to partner are the ones that are more likely to succeed. Then in terms of so that's the technology aspect. Then in terms of the business aspect, there's a huge win, in my opinion, for autonomous trucking, and a huge chance to win opposed to robotaxis, because there you have a real business case. There are still tens of thousands of truck drivers missing in the US. I think the latest number I've heard was 80,000, expecting to reach 160,000, so doubling in the next 7-8 years. So that's a huge business opportunity. So it's addressing a real need. Whereas on the robotaxi side, you're still competing with the human driver. So almost everybody can be a taxi driver. Whereas you need to be a professional to be a truck driver, and that's where professional truck drivers are actually missing. So there you can address a real business case, making it then obviously much easier for the trucking industry to accept the technology and to incorporate the technology into products, being trucks.
Yeah, and there are still quite a few players in the development space in trucking. In fact, I recently put together an article for our quarterly iTech magazine. That just is basically a survey of all the developers and the startups and the technology companies that are actively working to develop autonomous driving technology in one form or another for the trucking industry. And there's more than a dozen companies with some brief, kind of snapshot profiles. So that's still a pretty crowded field. And when you look at the space that's really pursuing this opportunity in the trucking industry, of course, when you look at market conditions today, at least maybe a macroeconomic view, there's some pessimism right now. We've all been seeing high inflation and across the board, and most economists are predicting at least a mild recession next year. That, of course, can create challenges for technology companies, for startups. Argo AI shutting down is an example that I hear coming up a lot. But from your perspective, how can AV developers weather the storm, so to speak, and especially in a field like this where it is very expensive and you can't afford to cut corners because safety always has to be the top priority?
Yeah. I think the key, and I mentioned that before, the key is partnering. So companies focusing on building an application should focus on their key USP, on their key selling point, on their key expertise, which is providing their specific solution. And we also see that in the passenger car industry, that just a couple of years ago, almost all companies try to build everything in-house. And now we see every year an ever increasing openness to partner and to adopt and incorporate outside solutions if it helps to reduce cost and if it helps to shorten time to market. Yeah. And that's clearly also the key for autonomous driving and autonomous trucking companies. They should focus on what is key to their application, and then adopt and incorporate solutions that are not key to their own offering.
Yeah, and we certainly have seen a lot of those partnerships develop with truck manufacturers, for example, and other companies and potential future customers in the trucking industry, all kind of working together with developers in a collaborative way to try to bring the technology to market and address some of the lingering challenges to commercialize it. But there's also I think it's been interesting to see more suppliers enter the AV space. So you see that in sensor and software suppliers. It's not just these startup companies who are out there on their own. There's many other suppliers and specific experts that are working with these developers. Companies like Apex AI are an example of that. That are supporting developers as they work to commercialize both ADAS and autonomous driving. So maybe just tell us a little bit more about how you see that ecosystem, this broader ecosystem of suppliers supporting this this emerging business. Is that a sign of maturation for the AV industry?
Exactly. So it's actually quite typical for technology development that in a hype cycle that in the beginning of a hype cycle, almost all players try to address everything, and then players notice that development takes a long time, is very expensive, and not everybody can solve the whole problem. So then an ecosystem develops over time, partnerships develop, and standards develop, which are ultimately enable partnerships, because only through standardization of interfaces, of architectures, partnerships can actually be built upon.
And then, finally, I know we're going to run up against time here before too long, but I think it's always important whenever we discuss automation, autonomous driving, autonomous vehicles. I think it's always important to discuss what that means in the trucking industry for professional drivers, in the years and decades ahead. So I'll ask you that question, Jan. How do you envision autonomous trucks and human labor working together in the future? I mean, do you see an opportunity for automation? Not just to, ease the problems with driver recruiting and turnover rates for trucking companies, but maybe also to improve jobs for truck drivers. How do you see that playing out in the future?
Oh, totally. I do see that the human truck driver and the automated system work side by side. So, for instance, a truck driver driving the truck out of the depot onto the highway, then the truck takes over under, for instance, in the beginning, normal weather conditions. Truck driver can go and prepare coffee, do paperwork, get some rest. Then let's say adverse weather conditions come up, the truck driver is alerted ahead of time, has plenty of time to take over, drives through the storm, nice weather again, truck driver takes over again. So the truck driver job can be made much more pleasant. There's a share of the workload, the system becomes safer. Along the same lines, more software in the truck can then lead to health and advanced health and diagnosis of the truck. Service can be timed better. Outages can be timed better. Parts, for instance, in case of a part about to fail, parts can be ordered ahead of time. Proactive maintenance can be done. So there's a lot of improvement both for the drivers and the company that software and ultimately what we call the software-defined vehicle can add to the industry.
Yeah. Lots of opportunity for connected vehicle technology and automated driving technology to come together in the future, and we're already seeing the beginnings of that. I think in both the passenger car and the commercial vehicle space. Before I let you go, I just want to open it up if you have any final thoughts on how ADAS and autonomy could change the trucking industry in the years ahead. Anything else we haven't discussed that you think about when you think about the future of trucking with some of this technology potentially on the horizon.
No, I think we've covered it well. Thanks so much, Thess, for inviting me.
No, really appreciate it. It's great to catch up with you, and I appreciate your insights and your perspective and being right in the middle of this emerging industry as it's been basically evolving before our eyes. So thank you for taking the time, and it's great to chat.
It's been an exciting 20 years, and I'm sure it's going to be an exciting next 20 years. Thanks so much, Thess.
I'm sure it will be. Thanks again.
Next up is your Brown Bag Lunch with host Dan Ronan, featuring today's guest, Seth Clevenger, autonomous expert and managing editor of iTech.
Hello and welcome to our Brown Bag Lunch segment. This is Dan Ronan. We're talking with TT's managing editor for features, Seth Clevenger. Seth, there's been so much activity the last year or so concerning the issue of autonomous trucks, and I know that this is your iTech feature story. Talk about what we're going to be seeing and what's in the article.
Yeah, so for this particular cover story, I decided to take really just an overview of all these companies that are actively developing self-driving technology for commercial trucks in one shape or another. And it's a pretty long list, so we profiled more than a dozen companies. As I mentioned, they're not all pursuing the exact same business model or use case, but all looking at ways to develop and commercialize highly automated driving technology in the trucking industry. And I thought it was really helpful, given all the just the sheer number of players, the sheer number of companies, and also just some changes in personnel, companies, management changing over time, sometimes going from one company to another. That it'd be helpful to have this overview of a who's who, if you will, of autonomous truck development. So that was the nature of this project, and I think that's helpful at a time when there are so many companies going after this really promising but also elusive goal of autonomous trucking.
Seth, one of the things that I've noticed is that so many of these trucking companies begin to roll out some degree of autonomous trucking with a driver in the vehicle for the most part. They tend to be concentrating their efforts on the Southeast and the Southwest, Texas, Arizona, Georgia to Atlanta to Dallas. Why is that? Why is this such a geographical situation?
Yeah, well, you're certainly right, Dan. The Southwest in particular has really become the cradle of autonomous trucking. Some of the earliest activity was centered in Arizona. Now we see a lot of that shifting over to Texas, and Texas has really become sort of the prime growth area for the testing and development of autonomous trucks. So you're starting to see these early routes for and cases for autonomous trucks developing. Say the Arizona California line out to Texas Triangle and I-10 corridor, kind of connecting all of that and through New Mexico as well. That really is where the largest amount of development work is taking place, and there are a number of reasons for that. One, those states have been willing to work with the technology development companies. They've the regulatory environment is favorable there, and of course the weather is favorable, right? I mean, you're in the Sun Belt, you're not dealing with blizzards, and you still have some weather, right? You still have sandstorms and other conditions like that to deal with. So it's not like it's always perfect, but it is a pretty good place to begin. Beyond that, there's also a lot of freight, right? I mean, you think about all the freight that flows in from the Southern California ports and heads east, and of course Texas is a major freight hub. There's these long open stretches of highway, many miles of pretty monotonous driving. That in theory, if you can automate some of that, you can shift drivers a little bit more toward regional haul, local delivery jobs that are a little bit more appealing, especially for that next generation of truck drivers that the industry is going to need to attract. So you can start to see how those pieces fit together. As to your comment about kind of the state of development, for sure, the testing that's happening today, there's a safety driver behind the wheel. That's again, these are products that are under development. They're not 100% ready for commercialization. So there's a safety driver behind the wheel, but a majority of the companies that I profile in that iTech cover story do aim to reach a form of level 4, high automation, where you can pull the driver. That is the goal for a lot of these companies. Not all of them. There are also companies that are looking at ways to support this as a driver assist system. So Plus is a company that is actually has commercially released its driver assist technology, and their goal is to over the course of many millions, even billions of miles of experience to fine tune that to pave the way for unmanned operation in the future. But and there are also companies like Locomation that are pursuing more of a human-guided autonomy approach, using a form of truck platooning or a truck convoy, where a follower truck automatically follows a lead truck that's guided by a human, and that follower truck, the driver can disengage and maybe even go rest in the sleeper.
Seth, one of the things I understand is that when it comes to autonomous trucks, we're still looking at a model where the truck may go on the interstate from Dallas to El Paso, that long stretch of highway from the central part of Texas to West Texas, and that if it ever does get to a fully autonomous mode, there would be a driver somewhere uh, close to the end of the route who would then take it the last 40 miles into the terminal, get it there, get the tractor unloaded, get that taken care of, get everything taken care of, and then bring it back out to the interstate, and then it goes on its own way in an autonomous mode. Is that still the business model that a lot of folks are pursuing?
Yeah, what you're describing is this hub to hub model, and that does seem to be, it's a leading, sort of business case that I say the largest number of developers are pursuing. The concept is if you can have, very much point A to point B on a set route, a planned route where you go fully autonomous, then you're hauling trailers from a certain transfer hub or distribution center situated close to the interstate, so don't have to go how far to go to get to the interstate, and then you travel a long haul segment of highway autonomously, and then drop that trailer off at another distribution center or transfer hub. But you have a driver, traditional truck, piloted by a human that's handling the first mile and the final mile legs of that journey. So that is the concept. The companies that are working on that technology are not there yet. Right now, they're testing, and they're hauling freight in some cases for customers. They're working with fleets and fleet pilots. So this is now integrating pretty closely with the industry, with some of the companies that want to be at the forefront of shaping how the technology is deployed in the trucking industry. But yes, this is very much designed for specific routes, specific types of freight, specific applications, especially long stretches of open highway on major freight corridors. And it's designed for, again, a very specific route. So if I get into the SAE levels of automation, like I just described level 4, what we're really talking about is fully autonomous, but confined to a very specific use case, right? Under certain conditions. Level 5 is where we start talking about an autonomous vehicle that can go anywhere and do anything that a driver can do. And honestly, that's not even worth talking about because we are so far away from that. I don't expect to ever to see that while I'm alive. So it's just not something that is realistic. What we're really talking about with autonomous trucks are certain segments of the job, certain applications that are particularly well suited to automation. That's where the developers are really focusing their efforts right now.
Okay, so let's talk about some workforce development issues because you and I hear from a lot of drivers that say, I love the trucking industry, but my time in the industry, I'm going to get roboted out. We've heard, how many times have we heard that expression or something like that? They're coming, they're going to take my jobs. What you're saying is that not so fast.
Yeah, for sure. Now, there is that tendency. I think, especially sometimes you'll hear it from drivers, but also from maybe outside observers who, maybe think or suggest that automation is going to put drivers out of jobs. And they're kind of pitted to get against each other a little bit. Human labor versus automation. And I think that's really just the wrong way of looking at it. And I don't think it's a realistic way of looking at it. Anytime that I see on the horizon, I mean, the reality is that professional drivers are in demand. There so many trucking companies struggle so much with high turnover rates. They're always ramping up their budgets for recruiting. They're raising driver pay to try to attract drivers, which is great. But it's just the reality of the industry is one where the industry needs to do anything it can to strengthen its workforce, and part of that is making the jobs more appealing to a wider number of drivers. And I think automation is actually one pathway to doing that. So it's just not realistic to think that the technology is going to develop at a pace and a scale that will start to automate away jobs. It just seems so unrealistic, when you consider the realities of the trucking industry's labor market. And also, just talking to the developers, what are they truly trying to accomplish? And they have a better sense of the technical challenges involved. Because this is not easy. I mean, I think that maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, there were analysts and observers who kind of just assumed that this the technical challenge would be solved. But being out on the open road and automating all forms of driving, and think about all the things you can encounter out on the road, all the 1 in a million mile kind of events, and even more, even stuff that's rarer than that, that you would have to plan for. And as soon as you're no longer relying on the driver, you need to find a way to for your virtual driver to handle that, and that is not an easy task. It's it's really a monumental challenge, and there are many developers and technologists working to solve that challenge. But I just really think that we're having the wrong conversation when we're when you hear that conversation, automation versus labor is just not realistic. Truck drivers are going to be in demand as long as and I are covering this industry. Decades down the line, we will need truck drivers. I don't think there's any realistic question. That's just not a question. So rather than sometimes viewing the technology as a threat, I see it as more as an opportunity. And why I say that is because, if companies can manage to automate certain segments, certain pieces of the industry that are, the toughest for recruiting, where you see the highest turnover, then you can start to shift some of the long haul over the road truck driving jobs more toward regional haul, local pickup and delivery. And when you look at the numbers, when you look at turnover rates, those are the jobs that are more appealing to more drivers. And yes, some people love long haul, and just, that's the lifestyle that they actually embrace and enjoy. But that's a dwindling number, right? There's just not as many people, especially younger, who want to spend many days, even weeks at a time, out on the open road. That's a tough sell for millennials and sort of the generation coming up behind them. That's going to be tough to find. So I think the industry is already moving in this direction, already moving towards shorter length of haul, more home time for drivers. Be with your family, be with your friends more often. So the whole industry is looking for ways to do that, and I think automation may be one way of getting closer to that. But even then, I don't think it's the whole answer. I think it's one of the answers for the future leaders of the trucking industry. Well, today's leaders and the future leaders of the trucking industry, to try to make these jobs more appealing and address that turnover rate. And I think that there will continue to be a place for people who just want to be over the road truck drivers. If you're a safe driver, if you're a professional driver who wants to do that, somebody will hire you. Don't worry. You are in demand for sure. But there's again, that sort of, I think, it's just not really one or the other. I think there's no reason we can't have some automation and use that to make human jobs better.
And ultimately make the job safer, which is a goal of all of us in the industry, and certainly fleet owners and operators, is to make the industry safer. And if it can be done with some sort of high-level driver assist that does that allows for the radar and the other systems in the truck, whether they be installed in the factory or as aftermarket, whatever the case may be, that's going to be the key, because we want to keep the men and women who are out there as safe as possible in the best optimal condition.
Yeah, and by far the broadest application for automated driving technology in the trucking industry is driver assist. I mean, that can go in just about any truck on the road. I mean, there's you're adding an element of safety and support to the driver, and the business case is built really on safety. It's about preventing an accident, and that's becoming more and more of a compelling business case when you look at the nuclear verdicts and the litigious environment that trucking companies operate in. Preventing one lawsuit, preventing one accident, a system pays for itself. So I mean, there's not as much of a productivity gain with driver assist, but you do get the safety benefit. And those systems have come a long way, and they'll continue to advance. Right, some of this stuff has been on the market for many years now, like, collision mitigation, lane departure warnings, adaptive cruise control. But we see those systems becoming more and more sophisticated, adding in a level of automated steering capability, steering support. That's sort of the new development in that space, and that we'll continue to watch that closely. And I view it as really kind of parallel, almost separate tracks. ADAS, advanced driver assist systems. We see that it exists today. It will continue to advance, and there's really nothing holding that back. That's something that I think will continue to grow. We'll see more active safety technology installed, at the factory level. I think adoption rates continue to grow again with as a form of risk management, and a part of this overall push to continue to improve safety. And then the level 4 fully autonomous trucks. That's something that has a much narrower scope. In the near term, it's something that will scale up gradually over time. Starting in very specific use cases like hub to hub. Some companies are working on this on private sites and terminals. Automating yard moves, for example, and then maybe you see cases like locomotion with form of platooning, where it's really kind of blending driver assist with autonomy. So those are all the examples of what's happening today. ADAS, driver assist, is only going to grow, and I think that just about everybody in the industry can stand to gain from that. And then we'll see some of these companies are working on highly automated trucks, and that's something that if it succeeds, will scale up gradually.
Seth, real quickly before we go, where can people find this latest edition of iTech? Where can they find it, and what should we be looking for?
Yeah, well, of course, the main story is online at ttnews.com. We do actually have an autonomous tab for our news segments. That's an easy way to find that. Of course, it's the print version was distributed to Transport Topics subscribers as well. So those of you who are TT subscribers already have a hard copy. So that's where you can check it out. And of course, we'll continue to follow this space very closely in the months and years ahead.
Seth Clevenger, TT's managing editor for features. You can find that information, as he said, on the website at ttnews.com. And you can reach out to Seth pretty easily, too. On the website, there's a staff listing with all of our emails and contact information if you have questions and you'd like to discuss this issue further. Seth, good to chat with you. Thanks for spending some time with us.
You bet. Thank you, Dan. Always good to chat.
When we return, Seth Clevenger discusses autonomous technologies and safety practices with Dr. Peter von Schmidt, CEO of Torque.
I'm excited to introduce the Transport Topics magazine event series. These one-of-a-kind learning sessions bring to life the people and conversations behind the trucking equipment and technology. I'm Dan Ronan. I'm your host and the voice of Transport Topics Radio. I'm joined by our managing editor for features, Seth Clevenger, features editor, Michael Fries, and executive editor, Joe Howard. Each quarter, we're also joined by an industry sponsor. I'm excited to be part of the Transport Topics magazine event series. I hope to see you there.
Back when Transport Topics published the first issue of iTech in 2001, the industry was really in a very different place. and so was transportation technology. And back then, the talk was all about CD-ROMs, the information superhighway, and the rise of dot-com companies. That was all new at the time. Trucking companies back then were really worried about open communications with their drivers, software to track revenue by the mile, and just greater visibility on web searches, for example. And the software and the technology of the time was almost regarded as an aid to the business, but not necessarily as a core part of a company's operations. Now, when you fast forward to the present, and it's really amazing how far we've come. All kinds of data makes its way seamlessly from the truck out on the road, back to the company's back office, to really inform dispatchers and fleet managers and unlock new levels of efficiency. Business processes are becoming increasingly automated, drivers are supported by an array of advanced safety technologies, and we're really just scratching the surface of this. So when you look back at that first issue of iTech, it really is remarkable just how much trucking technology has evolved over the years. We've really seen a tremendous amount of growth and innovation in the transportation technology space over the past decade or so. The industry's technology suppliers have really just continuously developed new software applications and telematics capabilities to drive the industry forward. And we've seen that from well-established technology vendors as well as startup companies that have jumped into this business. At the same time, truck manufacturers have introduced connected vehicle technology like remote diagnostics, which is now standard, along with more advanced driver assist technologies and even electric-powered truck models. And more trucking and logistics companies are investing in those innovations and actually putting them to use. Trucking executives who may not have started as technology experts are now talking about machine learning and business process automation as ways to really improve their businesses. Transportation companies realize that they need to understand how technology is transforming this industry if they want to keep pace with these changes and stay a step ahead of their competitors. That's when we started to rethink iTech and our technology content at Transport Topics. We really wanted to dial into that need for executives to keep up with trucking technology and what it really means for their businesses. And that involves understanding the existing technologies that are already on the market and in many instances becoming commonplace, as well as the emerging technologies that could shake up the industry in the future. Of course, this technology content is valuable for fleet technology experts, the CIOs and CTOs of the world, but we also want it to be informative and accessible for managers and decision makers of all stripes throughout the industry. No matter your title or your organization, it's helpful to better understand topics like ELDs, telematics, trends in transportation management software, machine learning, cybersecurity, blockchain, and even automated driving. And now we've refined that kind of thinking even further. This new iTech doesn't dwell on every technology trend. It focuses on the ones that executives and decision makers in the transportation industry really need to consider. We've distilled this content in ways that will help you more effectively manage your business today and also plan ahead for the future. Because you can't afford to ignore the trends and technologies that are just emerging today, but will become a prerequisite tomorrow. When we consider how much has changed in the past 20 years since we first published iTech, it's fascinating to imagine how the advance of technology will transform our industry in the next 20 years. Read iTech to follow this evolution every step of the way.
Next up, Features Managing Editor Seth Clevenger interviews Dr. Peter von Schmidt, CEO of Torque.
Next on Automate, I'm thrilled to welcome Peter von Schmidt, CEO of Torque Robotics, a developer of autonomous driving technology and an independent subsidiary of Daimler Truck. Thanks for joining us, Peter.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
So the majority of the autonomous driving technology development companies in the trucking space were founded between 4 and 7 years ago. I recently compiled a list for our iTech magazine, and there are more than a dozen companies in this space. And that's generally when most of these companies either were founded or really made a push into the trucking industry. But Torque Robotics stands out because it's been working on autonomous vehicle technology since 2005. So that's a really long timeline for, compared to most of the other companies in AV technology. How does that experience and perspective inform Torque's approach to development?
It's super helpful to have this really long track record of experience. Torque is super proud that they came in number 3 back then, and they were these big famous teams of Stanford and Carnegie Mellon, were more or less the origin of the entire autonomous industry. Torque decided they were a little bit the underdogs of Virginia Tech and
Hmm.
go this different path of the early adopters, mining, military, and things like that, and building out a profitable business year over year over year out of this technology. Um, and there's one thing to build a great tech, but it's even more difficult to build a great business, yeah, based on a great product, based on a great tech. And Torque just has this experience of doing it. Also with very large vehicles, trucks are large, but mine trucks are large, military vehicles are large. There's also a lot of carryover from this expertise that helped a lot on the new mission. And then Torque was one of the first to really see the tectonic shift from robot taxi to robot trucking, which has recently taken place in the space. And they were right, yeah. And Daimler saw it in parallel, and then they formed the first OEM AV partnership, which is out there. Um, I think that experience really helps a lot, and from there, then Talk took off and has grown significantly.
Yeah, and to your point, it's amazing how much has come from those early DARPA challenges. And a lot of cases, university students developing this technology for the DARPA Urban Challenge, for example, and now we see that those ideas have blossomed and become really a piece, an emerging piece of the transportation industry. Fast forward to where we are today. Torque is working with an advisory board that includes a number of some of the biggest players in the trucking industry. One of those companies, one of those advisors is Schneider, which just announced a pilot program with Torque just a few months ago. So could you give us an update on Torque's on-road testing and validation efforts, including that pilot with Schneider?
Oh yeah, more than welcome. Um, Before we hit roads, there's a lot of things until new software really hits the road. Be it a lot of checks that are done, close course testing, simulation, very small setups, and then finally we are on public roads. And the latest status is really driving customer pilots. We are still doing the majority of public road testing, by the way, hauling concrete blocks. Yeah?
Yeah, right.
Sounds weird, but for a development process, it's also not that bad that you don't have any disruptions. Yeah, if something goes wrong, you can immediately analyze what happened, and the load does not necessarily arrive on a fixed time at a fixed point. But as I said, it's important that we do not only develop a cool tech, but a great business. And that's why we learn so much doing customer pilots. Concrete blocks always behave the same. Yeah. If you haul customer freight, sometimes the trailer is empty, sometimes it's full, partially loaded, high, low, center of gravity, things like that. You need to arrive on time. You're driving much bigger stretches. So we're driving 1,000 miles. It was also pretty cool to see, is our technology scalable? Can we map 1,000 miles more or less like this and keep the maps updated? That was the first proof also for scalability. And then on the other hand side, of course, also it's super interesting to really make this a joint journey with customers so that they also learn what does that mean for us, for our operations, for our maintenance. Yeah, what are the capabilities of the technology? Where do I need to prepare myself for? Because there's driver shortage, but there's also technician shortage, and there are a lot of things that are super important to really create a cool product that the customer really can use and really likes and improves their business, because that's the ultimate goal: make our customers better in their daily job.
Yeah. And I was fortunate enough earlier this year to see Torque's technology in person. So I was able to visit your operations facility in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and did a ride along. And it was fascinating to see how you were working on this technology, not just open stretches of highway, not another vehicle to be seen for miles upon miles, but this was rush hour in Albuquerque, and there were aggressive drivers, there were cut-ins, stuff that truck drivers deal with every day out on the road, but not easy driving conditions. But these are the types of situations as a developer you need to work on and plan for, including sharing the road with frankly bad drivers in passenger cars. And I will say that my experience in Albuquerque traffic, many of those drivers would fit right in the DC area where I live, sort of
Mhm.
rankings of bad drivers. So maybe just talk to how speak to how you work on developing technology, a virtual driver that sometimes has to share the road with bad human drivers.
Um, yeah. I mean, first of all, for coming out back
Of
then
course.
and experienced the technology, and I was just in Albuquerque 2 weeks ago, and again a ton of progress. We now have the next generation of trucks out there, which also improved hardware and sensors to perceive the environment. Yeah, the trucks drive great, and in the end, you need to train them in difficult terrain. Yeah, it's don't get me wrong, but it might be much easier to run in the desert, 2 lane
Yes,
stretch, yeah, almost no traffic, daylight.
sure.
But especially in the end, a truck must be capable to do things that you just described, because they are reality on our streets, yeah, and there are even more crazy things happening. So the more miles we accumulate, a lot of things happen out there, which we're accumulating, by the way, by driving it there to see how our truck behaves. But we also can use the entire level 2 fleet that we have, the video captures, to analyze all near misses, all even accidents. It sounds bad, but all of this we can use to feed our simulation and scenario databases. One of the biggest things to especially do the really rare things and see how our system is performing there, and then the real world driving, as you mentioned, yeah, and there are but real world driving in challenging areas. And we just love Albuquerque because you have everything, things that you described. But on top, it's on very short distance. You have this dense urban traffic of Albuquerque, driving up north to Santa Fe, taking a new interstate, switching to I-40, climbing up the canyon, and then there's nothing. And this is so cool. Within an hour of driving, you have more or less all things that a developer could dream of, with some challenging driving behaviors and all seasons. I was there. I had snow, believe it or not.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's desert and I had snow, and a week before it was raining. You also have all seasons in there, strong winds. So it's a perfect proving ground, and
yeah,
we are so lucky that we get a lot of support from the region, from the mayor in Albuquerque. They are really welcoming, and they're also a little bit proud that technology
yeah.
is developed in their city.
Yeah, and it certainly did strike me as a really good proving ground for the technology as well. And I will say that I personally was surprised at how cold it was in Albuquerque in the morning. Being growing up in the Midwest and also now living on the East Coast, desert in New Mexico, I expect it to be hot, but a lot of variation in temperatures, and yes, you do get all kinds of weather.
Mhm.
But you talked about some of the unique challenges and rare situations that an autonomous vehicle could potentially encounter on the road. And I think that's one of the biggest, technical challenges for autonomous truck development is planning for all those edge cases, the very rare or unexpected scenarios that, might be 1 in a million or even, more rare than that. So maybe just speak to how Torque is tackling that challenge of preparing its self-driving system to respond appropriately when it encounters an unusual situation for the first time that again is very rare but could happen.
Um, and maybe I just pick 3 examples. It's a really good question, and I think I could talk way too long on this, and my CTO even longer. Uh, but there's one aspect. For example, if you want to test physically, that's close course testing.
Yeah,
Uh, here in Blacksburg, I'm currently in Blacksburg. We have a test drive or a test track, 500 meter, half a mile from our office. Not even that's just perfect. It belongs to
mhm.
VTTI. Um, and the teams were just experimenting. Hey, what about spontaneous changes in the construction site? You can set it up, stage it, change it. It's safe. It's closed course, and can play around and really provoke critical situations that you don't want to do on public roads, obviously. Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's one thing. How and I think also really nice having this proving ground really right around the corner.
Yeah.
A lot of things of this edge cases is then really done as a in simulation.
Yeah.
Um, that there's one aspect. So engineers think about what could happen, for example, during a lane change, yeah? Cut-ins and things like that, people swerving into your lane, and all kinds of things you could think of because you experience them in your daily life. And in simulation, you can then put them all to extreme, yeah, because you could cut ins with, I don't know, an inch distance in between, which hopefully you don't see in real life, but you can really stress out your system and see how long can it still handle it,
Yeah.
and when does it fail. And then you can also talk to lawyers, for example, and say, hey, is that good? And we are driving to our experienced safety drivers, like, yeah, that's how a truck should behave. That's really like the best drivers out there do it, handle it. That's another aspect. And then I was touching upon this a little bit, using our level 2 fleet, video captures and things like that, just because the testing fleet of level of autonomous trucks, autonomous ready trucks, it's tiny, but there are hundreds of thousands trucks out and of Freightliner trucks out, and using the video capture and
Yeah.
just capturing critical themes that really helps to we call it a scenario database that we fill up this edge cases, and there will be a point of time, and we are coming closer to this where it plateaus, where even the things that what happens one time in a million miles, we have seen all of them. Yeah? And that, I think once over, let's say, a full year, we plateaued and don't see anything new with the 10,000, 100,000 of trucks out there, then I think we have a good feeling that our scenario database is complete.
Yes, right. It's hard to plan for an earthquake happening and shaking up the road in front of the truck or something so unusual. But it's amazing
We had an absurd situation. One of our trucks got struck by lightning. I mean, how probable is that? Yeah, no one planned for it. Yeah, and things like that. And that's why you also just on the one hand side need to drive, and then tap into the huge database. There's more crazy things that your engineers think of in the
yeah.
first minute. Yeah.
Yeah, and I do want to go back to one of the points you raised earlier, and that's this integration work with autonomous truck developers, autonomous driving system developers with the vehicle platform. So in recent years, we have seen several autonomous driving development companies form partnerships with truck manufacturers. Case in point, of course, is Daimler Truck and Torque Robotics. The goal, of course, being to install the technology at the factory level rather than as an aftermarket system, and also design the vehicle to have the redundancy it needs to support level 4, unmanned operation. If you take a driver out, you need to have extra components, extra fail safes, because you can no longer rely on a driver to back the system. So Torque is somewhat unique in that it's an independent subsidiary of Daimler Truck. Right? Daimler acquired a controlling stake in the company in 2019. But there are other examples, as I mentioned, of these AV OEM alliances across the industry. And I think you have a great perspective on this, Peter. Of course, before you stepped in to lead Torque, you were the head of Daimler Truck's autonomy technology group. And we've already seen in your case, the work of Torque and Daimler together on a level 4 ready Freightliner Cascadia. Again with redundant steering, braking, other critical systems that ensures safety. When there's not a driver behind the steering wheel. So just tell us more about that collaboration work, and why is it so important to have a truck platform that's truly designed for fully autonomous operation, rather than installing the sensors and software, on more of an aftermarket basis.
That's an excellent question. And I do also now a little bit marketing session for my old company, Freightliner here. Yeah. But we call it autonomous ready Cascadia. That's really the foundation, and define it, let's say, as a little bit a stripped down chassis. No sensors, no computes yet, but just the redundancy that you need in braking, steering, and things like that. I think what Freightliner did is, I'm absolutely convinced that's the absolute benchmark in how such a system should be designed, because it was designed from ground up not just, hey, what's there on the market, let's retrofit it in. It seems to be redundant. It was a lot of thought put in, 1,500 new requirements to make everything redundant by wire so that you can send signals and receive signals and can actuate on them. But also cybersecurity, have enough electricity and cooling. And then really thinking through things. Yeah, as you said, a lot of things a driver does today, if something goes wrong, has muscles to turn the wheel or to pump the brake, but it also has ears or noses to smoke. Is there fire, vibrations, and things? All of this, in the end, you need to address. But even more so, importantly, and I think here went a lot of thinking in. Some people think just bring it to a safe stop. But what does that mean? I mean, there is not always a shoulder, or you are in a tunnel, you're in a bridge, you're on a railway crossing. It's not safe to bring the truck to a stop now. So it's designed in the truck should at least drive 10 minutes to arrive a really safe harbor, more or less whatever happens to the truck. And then build in a factor of 2 so that it can survive 20 minutes of driving, even worst case, so that you also have the edge cases of there is no safe harbor covered. And then for at least an hour or even more, still send signals to the outside world. I'm here. I have a problem. Please rescue me.
That's right.
I think I mean, that's important. That's important. And then all of this is developed into the base platform of the autonomous ready Cascadia. I think it really sets a super cool standard. Yeah, we had a discussion, is it over-engineered or not? But I don't think that you can over-engineer safety in such a critical application. I think that's the standard that you should meet. Yeah. Proud of this as you're still here because I was part of this, and but also proud now because I want the Torque virtual driver on the safest platform you could dream of, which is the autonomous ready Cascadia. Safety is always, since day one, saving lives, safety, that's Torque's mission.
Yeah.
But then the other thing, and sorry, I'm really lengthy here. Then now come the sensors and computes and things like that. I'm a strong believer that you could now take a chassis like this and have a bolt-on retrofit system that someone puts on. I think this is really unique, and it's not existing in the industry. And no Silicon Valley company has access to this. It's really this fully integrated approach, that you design everything optimal, integrated, optimal aerodynamics, reliability, built in the Freightliner plants down the road. This really this develops. This assures that in the end you have scalability, you have quality, you have good pricing, and it's just a superb product which is in the making. And that's really a unique thing that Torque has upon the access to this really great foundation.
Yeah, and it was also able to see kind of an early version of that autonomous ready Cascadia in Albuquerque, and it's also been trade shows recently as well. So this isn't just something we're talking about; it's also something that's been developed and is increasingly ready for that point when the technology is ready for commercialization. I do want to bring up the topic of what this technology does and doesn't mean for professional truck drivers, in the years and decades ahead. I think whenever we talk about, autonomous trucking, that's an important part of the conversation. So, Peter, I'll turn it over to you. How do you envision autonomous trucks and human labor working together in the future? And do you see an opportunity for automation to, not just address the driver recruiting and high turnover rate problems that so many trucking companies see, but also to improve the jobs of truck drivers in the future?
Definitely, and I think we also have now a little bit more realism of what the technology can do and can't do, and I think a lot of the fears. It's clear this technology won't come overnight and replace all driving that you could do in theory. Right. It will gradually sneak in, heavily supported by humans. And I think Daimler put out a number, Daimler Trucks, that best case, you can assume something like 6% in the year 2030 could be done by this autonomous hub-to-hub, something like this. But from now until 2030, I think we have a 30% growth in freight projected. So the key message is I think autonomy can augment the driver shortage topic,
Yeah.
but it's only one, or help
Yeah.
to ease it a little bit, but it's only one means. It's definitely not sufficient
Yeah.
in itself. The second thing is it could make. Why is the driver shortage? I think the younger generation of drivers doesn't have so much dream anymore. Whatever, 3 weeks through the country, I see it all. You
Yeah.
can do it on Twitter and Google and you name it, YouTube. So they prefer to stay a little bit more local or to the home. There's still enough long haulage driving left, by the way. Yeah, as I said, 6%. But I think that could enable really to make some of the jobs more regional, attract more people. And I think also if you do first and last mile, usually you know the warehouse, you know the people at the dock, and
Yeah.
usually you get a quicker handling, and they might even be a little bit more friendly. So I think there are a lot of things that could make the life better.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
And
I
in
think
the,
it's helpful.
mission control and in the hubs, so also a lot of new jobs are created, which are not only highly skilled. You have a PhD in computer science jobs to do the coding. There's a lot of, I think, super interesting new jobs created in mission control for technicians to handle super cool technology like radars, cameras, computes. I think it's creating also a ton of new opportunities for all kind of people and all kinds of educations behind.
Yeah. So I think that it's clear that we're hopefully have reached an understanding as an industry that we're not automating jobs away. This is something that can complement the workforce, and jobs may change, may evolve over time, but it's automation will be well suited for certain routes and applications, and not for others. I think
Yeah.
is a helpful perspective to have as we think about the future, at least the foreseeable future. And to your point, at least initially, Torque is focusing its development efforts on automating, those hub-to-hub highway driving routes that you talked about earlier. Why do you see that as the best initial use case for autonomous trucking?
I think that the perfect blend out of what the technology can handle safe soon,
Yep.
and where do we have a business? Because I think the graveyards out there are full of startups who develop the cool tech, but forget what you really need to develop is a cool product and a cool business that the customer really really needs. And I think that's why we think that the hub-to-hub trucking could be a really nice entry point where the first and last mile is done by humans. This hub sits super close to the interstates. So from there, it's just a half mile, super easy driving. And this might be super protected. Yeah, we only with traffic lights, maybe even a chase car. It doesn't really matter because it's just half a mile, and then you have the long distance autonomous driving behind. And the next thing you could also think about first and last mile much bigger than today. I mean, it could be, by the way, electric, so that the overall um, run from A to B has a better CO2 footprint. First and last mile, more or less minus 100%. The middle mile, an autonomous truck will roughly run 10% better, like a human truck, because you can speed down. You don't need to rest to eat or to sleep and things like that. All of these are small savings that help. But the last and first mile, it does not need to be a mile. It could be also 4 hours of driving or more. So and that I think gives you the opportunity that you're not only limited to this distribution center has 20 trucks per day leaving, but you can feed much more through this. And I think it's a nice entry point.
Yeah.
And from there, technology will evolve gradually. It will be able to handle more weather conditions, more complicated hubs. The hubs could be smaller and things like that. But it's important just to have a starting point which is meaningful.
Yeah. No, that's helpful. And I don't want to ask you to provide a hard date, because I know that that's very difficult, and it's probably an impossibility. It's more of a guess or a projection. But instead of asking you exactly when this technology will be market ready, could you just describe the pathway to commercialization, and when will you know it's ready? What will it take to get there, and when will you see that and know that it's time to it's market ready?
Yeah. I mean, just to give some indications, and on the one hand side, there was this number put out in the year 2030, it could be 6%, so it needs to start earlier.
Yep.
And the second thing is you saw the chassis or the autonomous Freight Cascadia. This is not super prototypish anymore, though this looks like real product development. So I think we are in this phase where we left the research advanced engineering phase and are really preparing to truly develop a product and launch it. Yeah, and then launch it in super small scale, super small, confined, really protected, whatever, and then grow it from there to hopefully 6% in 2030 or something like this as an industry. Yeah, to get there, there's a ton of homework to be done. The bar, more or less, and that's where we measure. On the one hand side, I was talking about this scenario databases. So, can we in the virtual world 100% represent what's happening out there and prove in the virtual world that our software is safe? Safe, what does it mean? In the end, we want to orient ourselves on a so-called exemplary driver. It's super hard to say a system is as good as a human 5 times or 10 times better or worse. And I think all those numbers are meaningless. What do we mean with an exemplary driver? That's like the best truck driver on its best day. So never distracted, never texting, never never tired, never close to the hours of service and needs to drive a little bit faster and things like that. Just things that happen, and I admit they happen to me. Yep. I have a CDL. It's just natural over 11 hours. You do not have always your best hour. Yeah, they're also, and that's, I think, defining this. This is more or less the bar where the autonomy needs to be at par. And then I think there are a lot of indirect benefits, because it's not texting, not overspeeding. In the end, it will be even safer, but it's hard to quantify how is 2 times better, 10 times better. And we say this is a meaningless discussion. It's just this bar we need to meet. When we meet it, it's safe to launch.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. And then before I let you go, Peter, I think it would be good to end on maybe a big picture question, because I think back to when the industry really started this conversation about the potential for self-driving trucks. That really gained a lot of momentum in the middle of the past decade. Of course, Daimler Truck played a very big role in sparking that conversation with the Freightliner Inspiration Truck in 2015. So I think it's interesting to think about that time, now about 7 years ago. From your perspective, how has the technology evolved and how has the conversation evolved, in the industry over the past 7 years ago about autonomous trucking?
It's an interesting one. I still remember when Daimler Truck put out autonomous trucks will be a reality by end of the decade. 3-4 years ago, people were making fun of them. Back then on me, how dinosaurs they To be honest, I think it was a pretty realistic assessment when technology could be ready. And it's not only the software, it's also sensors that see far enough, because driving a truck on an interstate, you need to see a lot to the front and even more to the back to do safe lane changes and mergers. So I think there were some too optimistic scenarios out there, but big picture, I think, this time frame that was put out is realistic. And what still holds true is really the excitement about the opportunity. I mean, just think about autonomy as a reality. Goods will arrive safer, faster, at lower cost. It's just good for everyone out there. Yeah, it's in the end, it's good for fleets because they can make their business better, but it's also good for the end customers because in the end, whatever the milk in your grocery store gets cheaper and things like that, or the food is fresher. Even think about how you could reshape entire logistics networks with trucks that do not have hours of service limitations. Goods could arrive faster. Some traffic is at night, not during day, because drivers want to sleep and autonomous driver doesn't care about. I mean, there's so many things, and I think all of this still holds true because there's a business need. And in the end, like I said in the beginning, great technology is one thing, but what I really would like to see is also a great business opportunity. It was there from day one. That's why Daimler Trucks bought in, why Torque bought in, many others, and it's still true. Yeah, some challenges on technology side, and especially also on the robotaxi side. But the key drivers why autonomous trucking makes sense and is attractive, it's still there. Nothing changed.
Yeah. Well, I think we have some very fascinating years ahead of us for technology in the trucking industry. We're just at the cusp of this, and it'll be very fun to watch. It was great to get a little bit of a preview in Albuquerque earlier this year. Thanks for hosting me, and really appreciate you joining this conversation and sharing your insights with us. Thanks again for joining us, Peter.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you and your audience. It was really fun, and I would love to welcome you in Albuquerque again next year.
All right, well, great. I'll take you up on that. All right. Thanks again, Peter.
Thank you. Bye.
Next up is Cup of Joe. Transport Topics Executive Editor Joe Howard offers a look into the newsroom with Managing Editor Seth Clevenger and Features Editor Mike Fries as they discuss current trends in autonomous truck tech and how they shape their stories.
Welcome again to Cup of Joe. My name is Joe Howard. I'm the Executive Editor here at Transport Topics, and this edition of the Transport Topics Magazine event series is called Automate. Something we've been writing about and reading about and talking about for quite some years now, automated technology. And we're nowhere near done talking about this. And if you want to talk about this topic, boy, do I have two of the best people to talk about it with. We're joined by Michael Fries, Features Editor at Transport Topics, and Seth Clevenger, Managing Editor for Features at Transport Topics. These are the guys who have their finger on the pulse, if I may be so cliche, of automated technology in this industry. Seth, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to go ahead and shamelessly promote the excellent work you've done for the main feature of this issue of iTech. I encourage everyone watching this to go to ttnews.com and click on the Autonomous tab and read Seth's cover feature on Who's Who in Automated Technology. And great work, Seth. And I start here because it is a very long list of companies that are in this sector who are researching this, who are developing this. But that is also a list that 5 years ago would have looked different. You've had some drop out, you've had some get acquired, and when you have a nascent technology, when you have something that's developing and growing, you have this. I mean, we can go back through history from the beginning of automobiles, for Pete's sake, where companies came and companies went. But this is a good snapshot of where we are right now, Seth. And I just kind of want to start with you in terms of where are we right now? It's still a pretty long list of companies that are developing this, pretty long list of OEMs and fleet partners who are with these companies. Just a whole lot going on. I can't imagine how much work you put into this one story, but boy, there's a lot to unpack and dissect in this industry right now. But where do you think we are after your years of covering this, and you're not even close to done? Where are we with automated technology and trucking?
Well, that's right, Joe, and thank you for referencing the story. And the reason I put that together is because it is kind of hard to keep track of all these companies, all these startups and developers that are actively working on this challenge of developing and commercializing highly automated trucks in one form or another. Again, there are more than a dozen companies listed, that we're tracking at Transport Topics in this space. Many of them have sort of this goal of level 4 highly automated trucks that can travel from hub to hub, on highway routes, certain specific highway routes, unmanned. That is their goal. Others have different business models. Some are looking at automating yard operations. Others are looking at a form of truck platooning where you add higher levels of automation to the follower truck, and you still have humans guiding the vehicles. So there are different business models, there are different approaches to the technology, different pathways. I think that's good because there are going to be multiple options for fleets who ultimately are going to be interested in deploying some form of this technology. They will have choices, and we're already seeing that with the partnerships that are forming. Right? I mean, we've come a long way from where we were, say, 6-7 years ago when this still seemed quite futuristic, and we saw some early demonstrations, but we were really at the demonstration phase. And even though here we are, 7 years later, and we're still not at, any sort of widespread commercial deployment, the technology has come a long way. The R&D work has come a long way. And what we have now are freight pilots on the road today, not just testing, but also hauling freight in some cases. And, really it's moved from, this concept, this idea, this vision to something that's much more tangible. And the developers are working on, all the little details. And there are so many to think about. What happens when something does go wrong? Example, okay, if there's a tire blowout, how does the vehicle respond to this? All the edge cases, all the unusual situations that a vehicle might encounter out on the road, things that truck drivers today deal with every day in one form or another. But even the things they might see, once in a career, if you're developing, a level 4 system, you need to think about that. So that's what all these companies are working on. They're finding ways to, fine tune the technology and address all the many concerns and issues, that need to go into, preparing technology like this, for, real deployment. So we're getting closer, even though it does feel like it's been, a long time we've been talking about this and not seeing, a lot of the vehicles on the road. And I think that, all along, it should be, should have been clear that this is not something that's going to just, scale up overnight, right? I mean, this is some very sophisticated technology, and it's also something that can happen at a more measured cadence, right? And there would be certain use cases, certain business applications. It's not something that just applies across the whole industry, as a blanket technology that can apply to all trucks, right? The trucking industry is very diverse. There's so many different applications, different freight types, different vehicle types, different routes, with different business needs. And there are certain fits for automation, and there are certain areas where it's not a good fit, either now or really in the foreseeable future. So that's where we are. It's much more real today, but we're kind of getting into the details of trying to prepare this technology. And there are lots of companies and lots of developers working on that challenge.
And when you mentioned a business case, that hits home, because that is where the rubber meets the road for all of these fleets. I mean, there has to be a business case where this thing is going to make sense, where it's going to make sense in terms of their bottom line, in terms of, the cost to run a certain lane, and the cost of acquiring that truck, and the cost of maintaining that truck, or, truck or trucks. So, Michael, it's funny because when we go down and look at Seth's story, I mean, I'll just go ahead and name drop one company. Ryder is involved in several applications, and with several companies, and rightly so. A company like that leases a lot of trucks to companies, to fleets, that maintains a lot of trucks for fleets, they are probably going to be the place where a lot of fleets turn to dip their toe in this, to lease one of these things for a few years, and then let this company handle the maintenance. So, what are you hearing, as editor of Calibrate? What are you hearing from, a lot of maintenance experts about what shops are looking at in terms of keeping these things on the road once they're in operation?
Well, for one thing, it's the important part about the maintenance aspect of all of this is it's kind of a, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but at that same time, as you're going to that bridge, we need a plan to figure out what will happen at that particular moment, which kind of sounds confusing, but that's kind of where we're at right now, because I mean, there's still a lot to do. I mean, there's still a lot of issues concerning just diesel technology in general, and just kind of keeping on track with that. One of the things I wanted to add to what Seth was saying was just especially about the business case of autonomy and how it's moving across the industry. I mean, you just kind of look at it at a big scale, even with Seth's reporting with Tesla a few weeks ago, when they finally delivered their trucks to PepsiCo. So I mean, it's kind of that sense of just sort of how those wheels are grinding when it comes to the pace of the technology. As for the maintenance, there's definitely going to be some owners and managers who are going to dip their toes into that unknown. But then again, it's an unknown, and the devil that we do know right now is diesel. But we still have to accumulate a plan. And in that right now, since and as Seth said before, this is a a slow grinding process, and within that process, the maintenance of it is a grinding process as well. So it's all about just identifying what needs to be taken care of, because especially when it comes to automation, there might not be too much tire wear. There might not be too much maintenance that has to be done versus a human driver. But right now, that's all under the testing. And as Seth said, once again, there's a lot of little pieces that go into that. And one of the things that come to mind to me are just when it comes to just the sensor indications. To say, like, for instance, if there was a rainstorm, and after that rainstorm there was a puddle on the road. What is there to for an autonomous vehicle to do when it's driving and it reflects that it has that reflection from that puddle that comes from that rain residue? So those particular things. Will that truck stop? Those particular things are something that needs to be addressed and are being addressed right now. As for fixing those particular problems, you kind of have to figure out what the pain point might be. And right now, quite honestly, we're not at that particular point yet. Right now we're at that point where we are trying to be, or the industry is trying to be aware of what problems may arise, because relatively, even though it's been going at a slow pace, it's still new within the whole context of the industry.
And that's the term that Seth used a moment ago was edge cases, and that's really what you're touching on there, Michael. And that's why there is so much testing, and that's why there are so many pilots, and why this is moving so slowly, because as these developers are learning, you have to figure out the big picture, how these things are really going to work on the whole, and then you have to address those edge cases like puddles. They have to do it all. And I think that's why we see so many companies, and that's why we see so many partnerships out there. I was looking again at Seth's story, and I drew a parallel to my past. I used to cover the radio business, and at one time there were two satellite radio companies, Sirius and XM. There wasn't just one; there were two. And at that time, each company was partnering with a different car manufacturer. If you wanted XM, it was going to be a GM vehicle, and so on and so forth. And content providers. We all know Howard Stern hitched his wagon to Sirius. But the same thing is happening now. We see Daimler over here. We see Navistar over here. We see PACCAR over here. Like, these companies are choosing their partners as much as they're studying a business case and studying how this is going to work. The OEMs are studying that. The fleets are studying that. They're also hitching their wagons to another company, to a partner they think is going to be the one to carry them forward into this technology. So that's going to be an interesting shakeout as well. Seth, as we've seen so much, change and acquisition and M&A and people dropping out, are we also kind of seeing or beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of who's going to be around, and in terms of, does this all shake out in that company A is going to be the one that's going to be more focused on last mile, and company B, well, we only have one company really doing platooning, for example. So are we seeing kind of a shakeout in terms of who the survivors are going to be, and also who's going to specialize in, A, B, or C technology?
Well, in my opinion, I think there's still a lot to play out. There's a dozen companies plus, is quite a lot. That's a pretty crowded field for an emerging segment, but clearly, these companies all see the potential opportunities here, the business case. Some of these companies have gone public. So there's been a lot of investment that's flowed into this space. Not just it used to be very focused on passenger car and robotaxi, but a lot of the focus in autonomous vehicle development has shifted over to commercial vehicles because of the business case. Really could potentially solve or help address so many issues. You think about driver satisfaction, driver turnover, and I think it plays into this need for the trucking industry to to craft trucking jobs, truck driver jobs to fit the lifestyle preferences of the next generation of workers. I think that there certainly will continue to be people who want to be long haul truck drivers, a regular route, out for days, weeks at a time. But that's a smaller number than it used to be. I think that the preferences of the especially the young professionals to be home more often, and the industry has to find a way to recalibrate these jobs to make them more appealing to the next generation. And automation can fit into that potentially, very nicely if that can take over some of the long haul routes and shift, a certain percentage of the jobs more toward regional and local delivery jobs, and there's a high turnover, across much of the trucking industry, but it's the jobs that are over the road, long haul, truckload, a regular route that have the hardest case with that, where you see 100% plus turnover rates in some cases. So finding ways to make the jobs more appealing, and hopefully, I think the jobs within the trucking industry should be and deserve to be jobs of first choice, right? These should be jobs that people seek out and want. And yes, there are many truck drivers who love their jobs, and but there's also so many who enter the industry. They do it for a couple years, and then as soon as there's a lucrative opportunity, maybe in construction or elsewhere, they move on. So that's part of why we see such high turnover. Maybe automation can help the industry as a whole really kind of craft the jobs that will be jobs of first choice, and help to address this workforce issue, which has just been this persistent issue that certainly as long as I've been covering the industry for 12 plus years has been this consistent headwind for the industry that so many companies are trying to address. But to get back to your question, Joe, I definitely think it's too early to see exactly how the industry shakes out. Which developers will catch on, which ones will stick with their current business models versus pivoting. But to your point, there has been a lot of partnership. There's a realization that I think this needs to be a combination of the focus on the software development side with virtual driver. You have to have the sensors, the sensor technology has improved, but you also need the vehicle platform, and that's why you see these partnerships with the truck manufacturers in particular. It's not. It's. I would say that the overwhelming majority opinion among developers is that the technology probably should be installed at the factory level rather than aftermarket, at least once you get to level 4. This is safety critical, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done. You think about redundant braking systems, redundant steering. There's added components to the vehicle. As soon as you take a driver away and you're no longer relying on the driver as a backup, you need to have a much stronger failsafe platform to do that. So we've seen the manufacturers work on that while collaborating with the developers. That's been one of the that's sort of the nexus of the the OEM work on this and the the AV developer work on this, and we've seen these partnerships form. Also with company like Ryder you mentioned, that's sort of the support system and the network to maintain the vehicles. There's work to set up transfer hub stations and a sort of a network of stations where these really kind of point A to point B trucks can operate, and it can serve as some of the first autonomous truck lanes in the future. So there's a lot of work, there's a lot of collaboration, and as much change as we've seen among these developers, and yes, it was a very different list, say 5 years ago, and a much shorter list 5 years ago. We also see newcomers. A company called Wabi, is just founded last year. It's sort of a later company to enter the space, and that shows you that I think that this is still definitely playing out. I don't think the dust has settled at all.
And it's funny when you bring up the fact that
No, I'm sorry, Joe. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to add on to what Seth was saying. And actually, Joe, that was a great analogy with satellite radio. I also I think another analogy we can place on this is going back from your analogy, Joe, going 4 years earlier with the internet craze, and when the internet first came out, maybe around 1999, 2000. There have been a lot of companies, a lot of shippers, and a lot of carriers who really latched onto that concept of the internet and just doing commerce by there. And like automation right now, you're seeing. You saw a lot of partnerships, a lot of businesses out there, a lot of new startups using logistics, a lot of logistics companies using the internet to make e-commerce and just kind of throwing it out there. Some companies were just we have a website and that's pretty much it. But it's kind of reminiscent to me of that particular time where there was a lot of people in this space and it was very crowded. And once kind of that flame sort of flickered, the ones that were survived eventually thrived. I mean, even when it just came to simple commerce as Amazon, which first started out by shipping books, and now it's pretty much the quote unquote Death Star. but the shippers and carriers really latched onto that internet. I mean, really latched onto the idea of the internet back then, 20 some odd years ago, to where it is now, where it's a basic part of our lives. And I think at that particular moment, and what Seth was saying was that I think once the dust settles, there's going to be some prominent players. There are going to be some bygone players, but I mean, we have to wait for that particular time to settle.
Right. Who remembers Lycos and Ask Jeeves search engines?
Mm-hmm.
I still remember, just quickly to go off topic, Lycos at the last possible minute, I guess had some money burning a hole in their pocket,
Mm-hmm.
and they sponsored. I want to say Johnny Benson was the NASCAR driver, and like
Mm-hmm.
at the he had a white car with black letters that just said Lycos, and like that car actually led the Daytona 500 for a few laps,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, oh my god, if you're Lycos,
Yeah.
you are loving this moment, because like it was like maybe this, and then they became a real sponsor for the car for a while, like Lycos. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, we giggle. But at one point, that was a business that had investor money trying to break into the search engine world, just like Ask Jeeves.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of feel like there's some company, the name escapes me, that actually kind of leapt ahead in the whole search engine thing, maybe. I mean, to the point where we say just Google it.
Yeah.
I mean, we've gotten to the point where it's, you know what I mean? It's a verb.
Yes.
So it's funny to me, like the same thing has happened over and over and over again.
Yeah, we might
But
say
that also kind of takes.
we might say Waymo
Go
it.
ahead.
Yeah, so we might.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
The day could come.
yeah. So
But it's funny. I mean, I've been covering this long enough to where I remember some years ago, and kind of Seth, kind of back to the whole, when it was really a nascent kind of idea, autonomy, and there was a presentation I saw where there was like automated technology at a rock quarry in Australia somewhere. Like, and I don't remember who the company was, I have to confess, but even then they were saying, well, it works here in this very controlled environment. And I remember the presenter even saying it got to the point where the workers around the trucks just kind of didn't even think about it anymore, because they began to trust that technology so much, right? But I feel like whatever that company was, where a lot of companies are standing on their shoulders, and those that have come since. And another presentation I saw some years ago, it was relative to trucking. But the presenter was saying, thank God for Tesla for investing all this money in battery technology, because that battery technology investment from them is propelling everything forward, kind of a rising tide floats all boats.
Mm-hmm.
So, Seth, you talk about how the greatest need is in long haul, and nobody is questioning that. But the earliest success is probably going to come regional and local and last mile, because it's a little more easy to control. I would argue that it's not going to be any one thing. There's no silver bullet that's going to just suddenly bring autonomy to trucking. But companies that have is that like Einride and Pronto, you mentioned, these companies that have very specific applications, like that's going to probably help propel the industry forwards so that enough is learned over there that can probably be applied over to long haul, to maybe at some point down the road, I dare say, there's going to be that inflection point where it all sort of comes together, where, well, what we learned over here is actually going to help us over here.
Yeah, well, I mean, again, there's certainly multiple business cases, and to this point, sort of call it sort of local distribution and short haul hasn't been a prime focus, except for one, very clear exception, which is Gaddick,
Mm-hmm.
and they have commercially deployed in small numbers. Right, they're in Arkansas, working with Walmart, and several other large shippers moving freight with autonomous box trucks on the road today, no driver. So that's out there. Again, so we're really at the very beginning of commercialization right now. So it is happening in very small stages, and and the same thing is happening on the passenger side with robotaxi. Again, small, but Waymo just expanded from parts of Phoenix to San Francisco, and again, very small, volumes and numbers and geographic footprint, but that original idea, the Google self-driving car, now does exist through Waymo in a few very specific areas, and it was scaling up gradually, but uh, the same I think is happening in trucking. And you mentioned Einride. That's another company that is looking at maybe shorter length of haul, shorter distances, and also opportunities at terminals and private industrial sites. Those are all those are different use cases. And actually, it's very different use cases than say long haul over the road. Um, but it kind of captures the scope of the different possibilities and different ways to apply the technology. But for the most part, what we're really looking at are repeatable routes. Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is not go anywhere. Just that a driver can drive. I mean, that the level 4. The constraint on level 4 is you're limited to the design domain, which is typically a certain route, certain it could be certain conditions, whether it's weather conditions that are appropriate. um, so we're looking at those conditions that are ripe for autonomy, and different companies are seeing different opportunities in different places, and yeah, maybe like there are some opportunities for box trucks, and are seeing that as well. But I'd say that the largest number of developers are really tackling that hub to hub, class 8 over the road, um, long stretches of open highway, and then you have human driven trucks on either end for the first mile and the last mile. So you have two driver jobs that are more local in nature, um, jobs that are easier to fill with a better lifestyle, at least meeting the preferences of a larger number of people. And you're covering and automating portions of some long haul routes in a hub to hub.
And that hub to hub does seem like the best. I mean, that seems like the for my money. I mean, that is the answer. That is the killer app, if you will. I mean, once they can get to a point where you have those trucks on a long stretch of highway, and just that case you said, Seth, and then drivers on either end. I mean, that's the perfect, I think, solution to this larger problem, of the driver shortage that we talk about. But the big thing is, and we're going to have to get to scale, I think, when it comes to trucks. And you talk about the platforms, and I've heard at least one OEM talk about this in particular. You need to have those redundant systems to get, for these trucks to really work. So getting all of it up to scale, so there's enough trucks, and it's economically feasible enough to build them and to sell them, and then to get enough of them on the road to make a dent. Again, it's going to take some time, but I mean, do we think that at some point down the road here, there's going to have to be, government intervention for incentives? We see it with EVs all the time. I kind of feel like this is the next frontier for incentivizing, purchase. Um, I mean, what do we think about that, Michael? What do we think about that as a way to advance, the ball in terms of autonomous technology?
Well, do we have another half hour to talk about electric trucks? I mean, it's one of the things with that is, especially with automation. Again, Seth pointed this out, and I'll add to it. With the driver, you have the two driver drives in the first mile and that last mile. What's to say that in the future, as this technology automation evolves, that driver, especially when it comes to level 4, maybe we can have an office setting where we have people coming in who are, quote unquote drivers who are monitoring, those autonomous trucks that are going that distance between that first mile and the last mile. I mean, I think that could be something, number one, that could help out the driver shortage that we're under in right now, and two, create a whole new industry. And especially what you were saying, Joe, with just that hub to hub aspect of it, because I think that's where that would be the sweet spot. I think those predictable routes that we were talking about, especially in that particular last mile. I think that I mean, as you said, I mean, right now there are autonomous trucks on the road that are doing those types of deliveries, and I think that. That's not going to eliminate the driver. That's going to add the driver to some management of the autonomous vehicles that are out. As for learning the maintenance of things, you kind of go back to right now in the maintenance space when it comes to automation. We have ADAS. So it's one of those things where first of all, as an industry, just as early as this year, the Technology and Maintenance Council are just drumming up ways to grab a hold of the autonomy that's coming out right now in trucks. But as I said before, it's a long ways away. But right now, we just kind of have to deal with the nomenclature at first, just kind of naming everything and just identifying the points of automation where we're at and where we need to be. For instance, you kind of look at the passenger side of things. There's been plenty of studies like with JD Power and other firms that the general public at large, maybe a plurality in some studies and a majority of others are kind of confused when you talk about automation. I mean, so you can kind of go, basic ADAS. Some people think that the automation is in that, the cruise control or the assisted brake function of their car. So, I mean, there's a lot of, misunderstanding and clarity that needs to evolve when it comes to that. That's the first step before we kind of even get into the maintenance of autonomous trucks. I mean, we aren't barely there. We're barely there on the maintenance of electric trucks. So I mean, it's kind of that it's a big mountain to climb. But right now, on the maintenance side of things, we're just mapping out a course right now.
And I'm so glad you brought up ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems. For those who may not know, right? I mean, now that kind of takes us from level 4, let's say, which we've been talking about for a while, and autonomous trucks that maybe only that maybe there needs to be a driver step in, right? Well, this is the 180. This is where the driver's driving and the technology steps in. So if it's emergency braking, if it's a lane departure warning or lane departure intervention, so we've got we have right now, and this is real world stuff that's on the trucks as we speak today. So these are systems that are on the truck right now, which Seth, maybe they're getting drivers used to the idea of the trucks being more capable, and not just drivers, but fleets and insurance companies and shippers. We're seeing in the real world that you can rely on technology to do some things. So that this could be sort of part of the building block towards a level 4 future of, in some capacity, where these ADAS systems are already kind of doing some of the work that we are going to count on trucks to do. I hate to say by themselves, but if the lane departure warning can work, and if the emergency braking can work for the driver, I think perhaps we'll eventually get to the point in terms of fleets, in terms of drivers on the road. It can work for the driver. It can also work for the truck. If the truck is operating, in a highly automated way, that these ADS systems can kind of be the soft way that we learn that we can trust this technology to do the job.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think certainly we see ADAS technology, driver assist technology, continue to develop in parallel with the work that's going on for highly automated and fully automated trucks. And I think it should be said that full automation that's being targeted at specific use cases, specific routes where the technology might make the most sense, where automation is the best fit. But ADAS and driver assist could potentially apply to just about any truck on the road, right? I mean, you're assisting the driver rather than acting as the driver. You're right. It's a way to enhance the safety of just about any vehicle and just about any application. So that does have the largest scope. But of course, the business case is solely dependent on safety, right? With full automation, you're looking at no longer being beholden to hours of service, trucks that can run around the clock, right? Not just 11 hours a day, but maybe 23 hours, 22, 23 hours a day. There's if you can get to unmanned operations in some cases on certain dense freight lanes over long stretches of highways, that business case, especially given the workforce challenges in the trucking industry, really stands out. For ADAS, it's enhancing safety, and there's a strong case there as well when we see nuclear verdicts, all these trucking companies are operating in a very litigious environment and doing whatever they can to be as safe as possible as best practice anyways, and always needs to be the top priority in trucking. So that ADAS has the larger potential market, and it's already here in some levels, right? I mean, we already have adaptive cruise control, collision mitigation, lane departure warnings that are now even becoming, in some cases, if you order the latest technology, some steering assistance, right, to help the driver nudge into the lane, or if you're in crosswinds to help with that situation. So we're even seeing automated steering assistance come in, and there is a pathway to go from potentially from ADAS to help support the development of level 4. So back in San Diego at ATA's Management Conference and Exhibition, I did do a ride along with Plus, which is one of the companies, one of the dozen plus I profile in the iTech story. And they are going about this a little bit differently. They are starting with technology that they have released today that is a driver assist system, but built to move toward level 4. So it's a system that's for highway driving. The driver activates it. You're still dependent on a driver, always a driver in the driver's seat. The driver has to remain attentive. So driver can't disengage. So it's acting as a level 2 system, but it's, they describe it as, highly automated driving. So it's basically just about the most advanced cruise control system you can imagine. So it's lane centering is keeping the vehicle centered in the lane. It's driving. It's, maintaining a safe following distance. It's responding to everything that the vehicle, all the sensors are seeing on the road. Not just radar and camera, but also LiDAR. So it's built much like it's like a level 4 intent system, but operating as a level 2 system. And their strategy at Plus is to gain many millions of miles of experience with that to help pave the way for unmanned operations. Now that stands out because most of the other developers see their initial product as a level 4 system, but that's an example of how we see some overlap between the advance of ADAS and this push to commercialize level 4 in some applications.
When you talk about nuclear verdicts, you're talking about it strikes me, and it struck me. I recently bought a new car in 2021, and my insurance didn't go up all that much, even though I was getting rid of a fairly older car, because my new car had all these safety systems. And you see that you're getting discounts, because your car will stop for you. So and the trucks are the same way. I kind of feel like that this is one of those this kind of bakes into the business case. If a fleet gets to a point where they're looking at, wow, if I add these trucks which have all these, all if it's ADAS and it can help me protect my drivers from potentially costly accidents, potentially costly nuclear verdicts, in the worst case scenario, that starts to bake into the business case. And then all of a sudden we're worried less about the additional cost and they're focused more on the potential savings. And forget money for a second. Let's just talk about human life and equipment, and that these things are going to, and which a lot of the developers are saying, like there is that. This is another issue that we write about a lot. The driver shortage is one thing, and highway safety is another thing. So this is one of those cases where when people really start looking at the business case, you kind of have to bake that in as well, Michael. I think that when you're cooking in the potential savings, if you will, in terms
Mhm.
of insurance, in terms of accidents, in terms of keeping that truck out of the body shop,
Mhm.
if it intervenes and prevents an accident, that's a very, very good thing for fleets as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe. Well, one of the things that you have to consider as well, I mean, especially for that business case, I think safety has to be a very important component to that. I mean, just as as we have all been talking, this automation, I mean, this automation, the automation technology has really, it's kind of grinding to this evolution that we're talking about.
Mhm.
And one thing that can seriously derail that is a news story about a Class 8 electric truck, crashing into another vehicle, or having something catastrophic happen to that, and that one particular story or series of stories, hopefully not, um, can really derail that momentum where fleets are worrying about the business cases. I mean, the business case of having an autonomous truck. I mean, and definitely with the environment of nuclear verdicts, that's one thing to consider as well. It's just kind of going on the flip side of that. So, I mean, one thing that on the maintenance side that I've seen is just the particular training that's involved, and that goes back to the ADAS. And that's one thing that a technician can grab and hold. I mean, grabbing and hold rather that wrench or that iPad or
Mhm.
notepad that they have
Yeah.
to make that particular repair. But I mean, that all goes into the training. And those are some of the things that the Technology and Maintenance Council have been working on since the beginning of the year to really get that in. As I mentioned before, the nomenclature, just kind of getting all of the levels clearly defined, and to know what we're talking about, and also just the technical checklists that are involved when it comes to autonomous trucks. What to pinpoint when that car goes to when not car but when that truck goes out into the road. What things should be on a particular maintenance checklist when you're dealing with that type of vehicle. And the other two, of course, is that that technical training that's involved. And that's another thing too. We talk about the driver shortage. We also have a technician shortage. So I mean, you kind of get to that point where you have this new technology coming in. You have a shortage of technicians, and right now on the on the equipment and maintenance side, I mean, I'm hearing conversations about just the training involved. One of the things that's a concern is you have people, veterans. I mean, veterans of the industry that have been around for decades, teaching younger, inspiring technicians, the diesel technology. Now you're going to have to teach well, number one, electric vehicle maintenance, and coming down the pike, autonomous vehicle maintenance. So you kind of have to find who's going to teach that. And I think the solution is kind of going toward the OEMs. So I mean, to have that base knowledge. So I mean, we'll see where that goes in the next 5 or 10 years or so. But I mean, that's kind of the where I'm seeing it headed. I mean, and just kind of the discussions that I'm having with folks. But I mean, but safety is a very big component definitely when making the business case, because I mean, if there's just one particular accident that catches the public eye or catches the eye of that decision maker, I mean, I think the wheels of automation may grind even slower.
And that's why this evolution is so slow. I think, and that's why we've been
Mhm.
covering this for so many years, and will continue to do so. But I also think that, some of the things you touched on there, Michael, in terms of, bringing people into the industry, and it kind of comes back to, Seth, what you said a while ago about a career or first choice. Like, all of a sudden, after all these years, trucking can be seen as this, technology forward industry, because it is. And, that can be a draw. I mean, people can now look at this industry and say, man, that's so cool. Trucks are going to, drive themselves, and, and these ADAS systems are already doing it. I want to be part of that. So if you're a driver, if you're a technology developer, no matter what it is, a service technician, they're going to have to learn that. But you want to be, if you're a young person looking at career options, and you want to get in on the ground floor somewhere, this is a good place to do it. The service on automated vehicles and automated, and whether it's level 2 ADAS or level 4, if somebody's going to work on these things and keep them running. And Seth, I think that that's an opportunity for a lot of people to come into this industry. If you're looking for a career and you're looking for something, kind of cool and kind of whiz bang, trucking just might be it.
Yeah, well, I think perceptions are certainly changing, which is great for the industry. I mean, I think the notion of trucking as this kind of very old school, kind of grimy and gritty industry is becoming quite outdated. What happens today in the maintenance shop is pretty high tech, right? I mean, there's diagnostics, and so much of this is software based. We're seeing increasingly modern trucks are very high tech, and you see what we've been talking about in this conversation. With automation coming in, it'll be even more so. And in first week of January, I'm planning to head to Las Vegas for CES, right? And there's a huge showcase for all kinds of consumer technology and gadgets and whatnot. But last few years, trucking has had a very big presence there. And that I think speaks to how the perception is changing, both from technology developers who are seeing opportunities and want to enter the industry and try to bring technology to the industry. Some succeed, some fail, of course. But I think it's changing perceptions as well. Perhaps maybe that younger generation will look at transportation as not just a good, solid job opportunity, but maybe something that's fascinating that they want to be a part of. It also comes with challenges, right? I mean, so like maintenance, right? Whether it's sensors and automated driving systems or electrification, that's a lot of new stuff to learn as well. So it's not without its challenges, and we shouldn't forget that. But I think it's both a combination of challenge and opportunity, with the main theme being change.
Yeah, and so Seth, I'm so glad you brought up. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I just wanted to add to that, where when it comes to the challenges and opportunities, I remember a conversation that I had earlier in the year during TMC with Richard Beyer from Bindex Commercial Vehicles, and the one thing that he said was that this is a great time. I mean, him being an engineer, it's a great time to be an engineer in this particular space, because we have this opportunity to change the landscape in the sense of definitely at the same time with electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles, and these things we've been talking about, the challenges and the benefits. Definitely, one of the proposed benefits is just addressing that shortage with drivers and technicians. I mean, and as Seth said, technicians, we're veering away from the wrench. I mean, it's not going away, but it's going to be a computer that we're going to use to assess problems with a vehicle. Coming in the next few years. I mean, we're doing it right now, but we're probably going to do it more so in the next few years. So, I mean, this is it's a great time, even as a trade journalist, to cover all this stuff, because there's so much new and there's so much forward thinking strategies that are coming out and being announced by these by OEMs, by service providers and things of that nature. So, I mean, just getting into the ADAS and all the other technologies when it comes to the maintenance, even like with sensors and when it comes to tire inflation. I mean, with ATIS as well, automatic tire inflation systems. That are going hand in hand with the new vehicles that are out right now, those diesel vehicles that are out right now. So I believe in the next few years, well, definitely in the next few years, we're going to see much more advancement in that, as the autonomy generally is going to move up from this level 1 or 2 that we're now having to that 4 and 5. So as I said before, it's going to grind ahead. So as long as the safety component is addressed properly by the vendors and the OEMs, which I'm pretty confident that they will be, we will get to that moment, and hopefully we'll all be alive when that moment happens.
Michael, I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's a good note to close on, because it's a great time to be an engineer in this industry. It's a great time to be a journalist in this industry. Seth, you get to go to Vegas again for CES, and but it's funny. I'm glad you brought up CES, Seth, because let's remember CES used to stand for Consumer Electronics Show, and it's gone way beyond that. And the fact that the fact that trucking is now central to this annual, highly watched technology and advancements conference. I mean, this thing makes the national news every year at this point. So the fact that trucking is center stage there says it all about this industry and about this technology. So have fun in Vegas. Can't wait to see what you report from there this year.
Yeah.
Make sure everybody goes to ttnews.com to see. Check out the current issue of iTech. Check out ttnews.com for the reporting from Seth Clevenger, managing editor for features at TT, and also Michael Freeze, features editor at TT. Thank you both for your ongoing work and for being here with me, Joe Howard, executive editor, for this edition of Cup of Joe. And thank you all for listening. And watching. We will see you next time. And thanks again.
Next up, host and Transport Topics Associate News Editor Dan Ronan puts Transport Topics Seth Clevenger and Michael Freeze in the hot seat on the latest EV infrastructure and truck technology.
Hello again, everybody. It's time for the Big Ideas in Tech. I'm Dan Ronan with Seth Clevenger and Michael Freeze from TT. So, fellas, get ready to play the big game. We're going to have a little word association fun with all of our viewers out there. And if you need some last-minute notes now, here's your chance. Seth, you guys both cover separate beats. You and Michael, you're always on the tech and autonomous. You're our go-to guys. Michael, you've been on the equipment and the maintenance side of things. Today, we're kind of blur the lines a little bit. We're going to have some fun with this. So, Seth, let's start with you. 5 words to describe the moment in terms of your reporting on autonomous trucking. The 5 words to describe the moment in terms of your reporting on autonomous trucking. Just 5.
Okay. They're very specific, and also I have to count very carefully, but I'll go with getting down to the details, I guess, where we are in autonomous truck development.
That's 5. Getting
words.
down to the details. I like it. What's the biggest trend right now in automation?
Well, a little bit of a longer response, but this focus on integrating the technology into real-world freight operations, right? No longer this pie in the sky concept, and just simply proving autonomous vehicles can work from a technical perspective. The question now, I think, is how does this actually fit into business operations?
We always like to think long term, but I'm going to ask you a question that's very short term. What's the most interesting thing that will happen in autonomous vehicles in the next 2 months?
2 months. Okay. So that takes us, just into the early part of 2023. But, I expect to see more partnerships formed between AV developers, autonomous truck developers, with fleet customers who are interested in potentially piloting the technology, as well as suppliers and truck manufacturers. It seems like we have some new announcement, almost every couple of weeks from an autonomous truck developer and a fleet pilot. So expect to see more and more of that moving forward.
Okay. Seth, thanks. Just took us about 2 minutes and 18 seconds to conclude that. Very nicely done. Michael, are you up for the challenge?
I am ready.
Okay. 5 words to describe, again, 5 words to describe the moment in terms of your reporting on EV charging infrastructure? 5 words, please.
Okay. Market share is the key. What I mean by that, Dan, is whoever gets to control the EV charging infrastructure space, be it the warehouses, the fleets, or even the truck stops, such as TA and Lowe's. Whoever has that infrastructure market share, that infrastructure recharging market share, is probably going to win the day when it comes to EVs.
Okay, so he who has the gold makes the rules.
That's correct.
Okay. For the next question, I won't ask the question like the old guy on the Dos Equis ad, because I happen to love those commercials. But who is the most interesting person in the EV infrastructure right now? He is the most interesting man in the world.
The most interesting man to me, and when it comes to EV charging infrastructure, is Taki Takaris from Pitt, Ohio. He heads the vehicle maintenance there. He has done a great job in Pitt, Ohio as well, in implementing EV recharging infrastructure into the fleet from forklifts to the upcoming Class 8s that are coming up. So it's a great guide for fleets to follow.
He is the most interesting man in the world.
Yes, he is.
He once parallel parked a train just to see if he could be done. Okay. What is the most interesting thing taking place in electric vehicle charging in the next 2 months?
Like Seth said, Dan, he alluded to the autonomous side of things. We're probably going to see more partnerships between fleets and vendors. And another thing too that we'll see is that the ever more ingrained regulations and adjustments and recommendations for vehicle maintenance when it comes to EVs. As EVs are coming into the fleet space, we're going to learn more about the maintenance ideas behind that.
What's the biggest idea right now, the biggest innovative thing taking place in charging infrastructure right now?
Well, right now it's going to be the evolution of having the efficient charge. We want to have trucks that charge less and have more power within that charge, and the less the less of the amount of time that they have. So we're going to see some more efficiency when it comes to recharging.
Okay, you heard it here from both Seth and Mike. The EVs are coming. It is best we be prepared. Next year, we will kick off our 2023 Transport Topics magazine event series with an event solely dedicated to EV charging infrastructure. If you're interested, look for updates at ttnews.com. And with that, we'll see you next time for the big ideas in tech. Thanks for watching. Well, now we've reached the end of Automate. We thank you for joining us. We hope you've enjoyed the discussions and gained some insight into the new innovations in the trucking technology, the latest advancements in autonomy, and the people behind it. We've certainly had an interesting array of guests, don't you think, today? Don Burnett shared his experiences beginning with the first forays into self-driving cars and trucks and the progress being made towards the full commercial deployment. Vivian Sun brought us a lot of insight into the best path forward, collaborating with the industry, proving the technology, and then integrating it with the OEMs. Dr. Schmidt, he provided us a deep understanding of each step of the process, from the research and development to the simulations and the pilots, to ensure both safety and the success. Hearing the key industry figures discuss their thoughts on modern solutions to today's freight transportation problems, the goals of unmanned operations, and how the developers are partnering with the industry to fine-tune their products, it's interesting to get these different perspectives, and it gives us some new information to digest and apply to our own work. What lessons will you take away from today? Now, that's all for this edition of Automate, and while this is the final TT Magazine event of the year, you have another event series to look forward to in 2023. The first quarter's event will bring to life the topics and threads found in Calibrate. In the meantime, you can find out more about the topics we've been discussing today and everything else trucking technology and innovation in our quarterly magazine, iTech. I'm Dan Ronan, and thanks for all of us here at Transport Topics.
Thank you for joining us. This was a Transport Topics magazine event series production.